All right, and we are back, ladies and gentlemen, switching it into the higher consciousness, higher gears here on Truth Frequency Friday edition. I'm so glad that we have our next guest on because my dear friend AG has been speaking so highly of her that, I've got to admit, I do so much with the website and so much with posting articles and things like that. He's been trying to get me to listen to some of her talks, and I just simply don't have time. But what better way than to actually get to speak to her myself? So I'm very lucky in that regard. Tanaath, welcome to the show. Do we have you with us?
Can you hear me?
There you are. How are you doing?
There we are. I'm good. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo, so I don't know if that's on my end. Sounds like it was cleared up. Okay,
excellent. Yeah, sometimes Skype does that. It'll clear itself up, definitely. But tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I've got several questions that AG put together that he wanted me to relay to you.
Well, I'm Tanaath. I'm part of the command structure of the Silver Legion. The Silver Legion is a interdimensional, spirit realm-based organization, currently non-physical. That is, we can't manifest in the physical Terran Earth world here. What we do is we specialize in more or less removing problems. The problem that we're looking at helping remove here on Earth is some of the interference that has gone by the name of, well, variously, the Cabal, the Reptilians, the Greys, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them. All of these guys who have been invested in basically keeping human consciousness down.
There is definitely...
We're not attempting to I guess, shove human efforts out of the way on that, but we are trying to assist in whatever way we can, subtly though that may be. Sorry.
Fair enough. Now, I was going to say there's definitely a lot of dark forces at work in the physical and spiritual planes as well. I mean, I'm facing them every single day, and I know everybody out there is as well. I tend to go along with the reptilian idea that they do have a good hand of control in this, and I would even go so far as to say that they're using our world leaders as puppets, like finger puppets.
Yeah. Yeah, hand up the unmentionables.
Exactly.
We have that view as well. We share that particular perspective. And one of the things that we aim to do, since spirituality has been so suppressed on this planet, and what that achieves in essence is it makes it very difficult for Terrans to actually fight back on an even playing field. So we do what we can to level the playing field from behind the scenes.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you do that?
Well, there's several ways. One is by encouraging the release of actual information, which enables human beings to then empower themselves and fight back on an even foot. And the other way in which we do that is by actually going and removing the spiritual barriers.
I can definitely relate to that. I have felt a lot of spiritual blocks in my journey as we have progressed with Truth Frequency, getting this kind of information out there. And a lot of people don't realize, but these spiritual blocks can be there without you actually realizing that there is a block there. It's just things just will not work right. Sometimes the brain doesn't want to work right. The pineal gland seems blocked off. You're out of touch with your spirituality, and therefore you start making bad decisions as a result.
Mm-hmm. Or you're in a paradigm which does not permit you to empower yourself spiritually. You're in a thought paradigm which suppresses you and oppresses you rather than freeing you. We see a lot of that too.
Yes, definitely. What is your take on, and I'm kind of going off subject here for a second, but it's something that we've discussed extensively with people like Joe Rogan, Mitch Schultz, Edie Frexka, Rick Strassman. What is your take on dimethyltryptamine, DMT, and reaching the outer realms through the use of psychedelics?
Well, you see, those things like DMT is produced naturally in your pineal, which I think anybody who studies DMT will be quite familiar with this.
Right.
The pineal is the human interface with the higher dimensional reality in the spirit world. By taking DMT, you can goose this. Now, I'm not condoning the use of illegal drugs.
Of course.
But you can goose it and temporarily produce pineal activity that is much higher than that individual would normally have. Now, what that means in terms of the truth of the experiences that people have, I can't say, because truth is relative to the individual in that regard.
Well, Terrence,
I do believe that DMT is one of those substances that are not habit forming. Most entheogens, such as Salvia divinorum, ayahuasca, DMT, they don't let you abuse them.
No.
We'll put it that way.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that.
Ayahuasca, you wouldn't want to, and I don't know. I have heard salvia described to me as sucking on an old mossy log that's on fire. It's described to be not the most pleasant physically to use, and people have described it becomes unthinkable to overuse the substance.
Right.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I found the same with my DMT experiences. If I do it too often, then the experiences start to become more out of control and almost punishing, if that makes any sense. But if I space it out within several months or years, then
and you use it in the right context.
Right. Then
Yeah.
I find I'm able
It's
to.
very context specific. I've had anecdotes from a friend of a relative of mine who used DMT. Actually, no, sorry, it was salvia that he used, who had an experience and was told, "Don't do this again." He was told flat out, "Okay, it's okay that you're here now, but please don't do this again."
I've done salvia a few times, and it was very dirty. It did not feel right, and I did it prior to doing DMT, and I was trying to reach the DMT realm through salvia. Of course, I didn't know what the DMT realm was. I've just read about it and heard about it, and I was trying to get to that state, and it just didn't work, and I don't recommend it for anybody.
Yeah. One thing I would caution is when it comes to substances like this, you can, with diet, meditation, practice, you can achieve these same effects bare-brained without the use of substances. The substances are useful in proving to you that it is possible to do. I recommend that people who are interested in this attempt to do the bare-brained methods, because they can become a crutch. Entheogens actively attempt to try to avoid becoming a crutch, but if you're determined, they still can.
Well, and I understand your point of view on this, but I mean, even according to anthropologists, we've been using these plants for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and until
but usually in ceremonial and spiritual applications,
exactly.
It wasn't just go home, take a hit, veg out,
and And the thing is with DMT and with salvia and with most of these psychedelics, it is not possible to just go home and take a hit.
They actively discourage the use that way. The substance itself actively discourages that, which is interesting because other intoxicants do not actively discourage their own overuse.
Right. Other intoxicants actually will
encourage
swing
overuse.
they will swing the other way in a very big way. Cocaine, for instance, or heroin.
Heroin
will stimulate
is
that.
Very, very awful.
Very, very addictive.
Right. I've always looked at those as bastardized versions. LSD even though Terrence McKenna speaks highly of LSD, and so does his brother Dennis and many other entheogenic researchers, I still would prefer the entheogenic plants to anything else. Absolutely. Yeah. But let me
Nature craft's better than a lab.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely.
Exactly.
When it comes to LSD, most natural things, because of the self-limiting effect of those substances, it's hard to do something that would do permanent damage to yourself that way.
Right.
But with something like LSD, it is still possible to do permanent damage to yourself by using it.
Yes.
Generally, I know now I think people are probably familiar by now that I'm affiliated with the Galactic Federation of Planets. The Galactic Federation of Planets does not regulate anything that comes out of the ground.
That's beautiful.
That's good. That's good.
That is, apparently they've reached a higher consciousness than we have here, because we still can't grasp that concept of if it comes from the ground, it's okay. But if we have Monsanto's spraying chemicals all over it, then it's bad.
Well, nightshade also comes from the ground. But the thing about entheogens is it's very hard it's very difficult to hurt yourself with them. You have to be really, really determined.
Right.
Right. And most of those poisonous plants have been identified long ago. And, most people know to stay away from, like the holly tree plants. At Christmas time, you stay away from them. You don't eat the berries because they could kill you. But these special plants have been used successfully to treat addictive disorders.
However you say ibogaine.
Yes, has been very effective in treating addiction. But let's move on to
Let me flip the topic. I just wanted to get a brief understanding of your views on that. But you say that you can, I guess, lift the spiritual blocks and the veils. Can you go into a little bit about how you do that?
Well, we've been working on it. Some of these things were. Well, let's put it this way. The modern Western scientific view firmly separates science, tech, spirituality. Tech is seen as an aspect of science which is seen as diametrically opposite of spirituality. We don't have those kind of distinctions. Spirituality and technology work hand in hand. And there have been technologies put in place at higher dimensional levels to suppress human consciousness and human spirituality. Well, there's also been societal measures in order to, further add to that matrix of control. But some of these veils have spiritual effects, but were put in place technologically. And in order to eliminate them, you need something that is capable of working both spiritually and technologically. And we've been removing apparati and, even ritualistic magic things, stuff put into place whenever we find it. And I think, a lot of it, people have been tricked even into maintaining some of these structures of oppression, even on a spiritual level. I talk about the misuse of the Merkaba and the Merkavic and those kinds of constructs. If you're not very careful with your intent and what you're doing with a Merkaba, you can actually imprison yourself, which is not a good thing. So I would not recommend the Merkaba as let's say an entry level endeavor or an entry level meditation. I would, as an entry-level meditation, and to be absolutely unmistakable about your intent, is simply just intend and put your own light behind it without binding it to a structure.
It's my understanding that, according to some sources, we had the technology that you have. We had the blending of the spirituality and the technology long ago. We're talking thousands and thousands of years ago, and maybe even hundreds of thousands, I don't know. And at some point, this Merkaba, a false Merkaba per se, was put into place, and that has been keeping us in chaos and out of control, actually. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about those theories?
Well, for one, to call them a theory is kind of like calling gravity a theory.
Okay.
Yes, it's a theory. There's a theoretical framework there, but it is also representing something that is a truth. Human beings on this planet did have advanced technology, spiritual technology. All of the civilizations on this world were highly advanced up until about the fall of Atlantis, 14,000 or so years. I'm not sure. The experts in Atlantis could tell you whether it's 14 or 12 or whatever. But after Atlantis fell, we were basically knocked back to the Stone Age in terms of our tech and our spiritual understanding. And at that point, human life on Earth came under a number of different assaults, including genetic assaults, which dropped our our lifespan from 1,000 to 1,500 years down to 50 to 100 if you were lucky. And there were also introduction of damaging microbes. You see, usually what the case is that microbes, like other forms of life, live in harmony and don't necessarily cause disease. Populations self-limit, the Malthusian concept that, you need all this mass death to keep populations in check. It's not true. A aware and awake civilization will self-limit quite readily. Bacterial assaults, diseases from viruses, all of these things were introduced, at least the harmful ones. Disruptions to our genetic code from 12-strand DNA to 2-strand DNA, not just human beings, but everything on this planet. Additionally, we also had the fact that we were scattered in small enclaves, which made it very easy for hostile interests to land, show up, cow some poor peasant off in the woods or out in the desert, say, I am your God, now listen to me, and force them to obey, and round up these little populations into slave groups, and everybody had their own little slave group. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm talking what are commonly known as the reptilians, and yes, they are real.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how control over humanity was put into place. There was the damage of our food supply. Introduction of agriculture in itself is not a bad thing, but some of the substances introduced during agriculture came from hostile sources and were further part of the genetic damage and control structure that was being set into place starting about 14,000 years ago. And that includes wheat. These things, the stuff that they tell you to eat 6 to 10 servings a day of, was introduced by reptoids. There is no mistake that with the agricultural revolution, what was observed in the fossil record of humanity is that even though we were suddenly being able to have more kids that lived to adulthood, there were far more diseases. Fewer people were dying of accident or bacterial infection due to injury, but people were dying more of chronic diseases when agriculture was introduced, and that's largely due to the fact that a lot of the agricultural products that were introduced were not designed for optimal human health. Quite the opposite.
Oh, so it was food designed to keep us in check.
It was food designed to keep us in check. It was religious structures that were designed to keep us in check. It was political structures that were designed to keep us in check. The feudal system is extremely reptoid. And the switch from a feudal system to an Orion-based mercantile system wasn't much better. Even when you started to get into the more modern era, movements like the Enlightenment were identified very quickly as a threat and then co-opted so that you only had partial enlightenment or pseudo-enlightenment. And that's actually where you started to see the real hardcore split between science and spirituality. For instance, the Enlightenment did a lot of good things for people, but it also accomplished the absolute split between science and spirituality that permeates Western culture, which has really, really helped to keep us down.
Right.
And fighting with each other instead of fighting the
Yes, and that was another thing. Human beings and even non-human beings of other civilizations, positive civilizations, when we meet other civilizations that are not like us, we celebrate our differences and bond over our similarities. Down here, we're forced to celebrate our similarities and kill each other over our differences. That kind of divisiveness is introduced, and it's yet another method of keeping us in check. After all, if we're too busy killing each other over whether somebody is gay or somebody is Republican or somebody is French, we're never going to bond together enough to actually achieve anything effective.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think that goes to religion as well, which is something that I've been very outspoken against because of the divide and conquer, because it keeps us fighting amongst each other rather than focusing on the real enemy.
Hmm. And when it comes to religion, none of us are religious. We take as a matter of fact the existence of a creator with intention, but we don't feel the need to worship this. It doesn't demand that we obey it. In fact, its highest stricture or highest command is live according to your free will.
Exactly.
I'm right there with you. I've had these things embedded in my heart, and I've always known that this is the way it was, but I've never heard anybody put it like that.
So well, yeah. Yeah.
And it's not taken on a matter of faith, it's taken on a matter of fact.
Right. That's the problem. I've seen too many videos of people yelling at their kids and screaming at them that they're not going to get any Christmas presents because they said something bad about Jesus, or they're, getting the crap beat out of them because they won't go to church.
If that being exists as claimed, it's not going to hurt him if somebody says something that's bad about him.
Exactly. Right. He's going to be a forgiving, loving, and not even an individual. If he's who he says he is, he's God. And if God gets jealous or angry over petty things like that, like a child who doesn't even know what he's saying, to say something bad about him one time, that's not any God I want to serve.
Yeah, or to send somebody to an eternal torment because they require more than what somebody else told them. It strikes me as a very extreme punishment for a very small crime.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That's what I always throw back at my religious friends. When they say, you're going to go to hell because of this. Well, you know what? Don't worry about it, because if I'm right, you're not going to go to hell, because my God doesn't do that. If I'm wrong, then yeah, sure, okay, you're right, and you get to sit there and you get to point your finger down and laugh at me while I'm burning. So bravo.
Yeah, good for you. But, the whole thing about religion that I don't like is the way that it divides people. And it doesn't just divide people amongst each other. It divides people mentally and kind of creates a trauma-based mind control based on the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And they use that sacrifice to convince you that you're bad and that you need to pay for your sins, but that Jesus already paid for your sins, but you have to follow each and every one of these people that we tell you to follow. And
yeah, not even the original guy, all the guys who came after interpreting the works.
Exactly.
Believe what they say. Sorry, that doesn't fly with me.
Exactly.
Those were people. Exactly. People could be wrong.
Right. And the Inquisition, I've done a lot of research on what they actually did. And they actually released the files, the secret files that the Vatican kept for 500 years. And they finally released the documents. And it is astounding the amount of spiritual information that is in those papers. They had to have been targeting shamans and spiritualists and people who knew the truth, people who knew, what the Merkaba really was and what these things really were. And even Nostradamus himself was very aware of the Kabbalah and was an avid student of the Kabbalah. And so we have to look at the history of these things, but just the history, not the contemporary history of the last 100 years,
historic
because
history.
It has been corrupted as hell by things like
it's not just Christianity which has suffered this interference.
It's
at
the New
some
Age
point,
too.
Any kind of movement that became mainstream in any way has become infiltrated.
Right.
And then you have also creation or infiltration of the third ways that are then offered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they continuously offer up new explanations for things and new religions and new fads that we should follow, and the Hare Krishna movement and all this stupid crap coming out of the Esalen Institute since the 1960s and 1970s. It's all based around this hippy dippy new agey, all love and light stuff, without ever addressing real issues that need to be addressed before we can have healthy children who are going to have healthy grandchildren and great grandchildren and so on.
And the problem with that, even more than just that, what's really insidious about this is it's a complete, like even among the love and light movement, is it's a complete control of the discourse, such that if you offer an alternative opinion or focus on, say, for instance, action or change, it's cast down as being not enough love and light or not loving enough, and it's assumed that you can somehow achieve results without actually doing anything if you just love enough.
Right.
And that's as far as I know, if you want something, you still have to expend energy to get it.
You know what?
Or to achieve it.
We tried, me and Chris with Truth Frequency, we tried for almost 4 years to do the love and light thing and to just, love everyone. And we realized it wasn't getting anything done. We weren't getting attacked as often, but you know what?
Yeah, but it's not achieving anything.
Yeah, you can't be a teddy bear in a world of reptiles.
The problem with the love and light is it's missing action. You can be loving and full of light and still not be passive.
Just like the old Egyptian temples, especially Hatshepsut's temples, they always depicted people in motion, and that means that they're telling you that the body should always be in motion. Your brain should always be, moving. You should always be learning new things and and growing in your consciousness, in your body, and in your mind. And so it's very apparent to me that the last 30, 40 years of psychology has been all about rounding up these people who would be really free thinkers. And I think even starseeds on some level, spiritually, we decided to come here for a certain purpose, whether it's to expose certain things or be whistleblowers or to, do radio shows like we are, or to do what you're doing. And that's our job. That's our job here. And so
this is our mission. This is our job.
Right, exactly. And
we do get secondary benefits from being here because nobody gets out of life without learning something.
Right.
But it's almost as if you have certain people, and we know a few of them. Natalie, a girl we know, she's 12 and she's a radio host, and she's been a radio host for 2 years. And
that's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And these kids are standing up against Monsanto. They're actually involved with things now. And it's not just the parents that are telling them to go out there with the signs. They really understand what's going on. And my son, for instance, he has his own organic plot in a community garden. And I'm extremely proud of him for that. And he knows what the differences are between pesticides and GMOs and non-GMOs and organic. And I'm proud of him for that. And I think these kids that are coming in now, like Dolores Cannon says, are here for a higher purpose.
They are, and that's why there's such a frenzy to try to suppress them any way possible. Give them Ritalin, give them Dexatro, or whatever that stuff is. Give them fluoride, give them all this crap so that they're not thinking and not acting and not doing. Take every effort in school to turn them from thinkers to passengers.
Well, and what's interesting is the people who are letting their kids be put on these meds were put on meds for depression back in the 90s when Columbine and all that stuff was going on. Even I was put on antidepressants within 6 months after Columbine. It was for, bad periods or something. And,
there's the whole discourse around mental health, depression, and suicide. Even though there have been efforts within the mental health community to try to remove stigma, there seems to be that, still the societal discourse around the fact that it's something you don't talk about. It's something that's still taboo. And with suicidality, there's no recognition that depression and suicidality are things that occur to a lot of people. Maybe not everyone, but A lot, and the whole urge is to panic and medicate rather than get at what might legitimately be causing these feelings.
Exactly. You know what I think? I think that you're supposed to feel bad when bad things are going on around you. And
Yeah.
you're supposed to want to change those things so you don't feel bad anymore. You're not supposed to take a pill and just sit in your crap and, enjoy it.
Depression often, there's chemical depression, and I can understand that pills can help alleviate that. But a lot of the times, depression, it originates from a lack of control in one's own life, or a lack of perceived control in one's own life. When your locus of control is entirely outside of yourself, it's very difficult to handle, especially when things that are happening are not things that you like.
Right. And a lot of these people...
we're kept in a society, we're kept in positions where the locus of control is often outside of ourselves entirely.
Oh, it's
We
always...
don't have control over the price of gas or the fact that we need to fuel up. We don't have control over our wages. We make what the market dictates. We don't have control over the price of food at the grocery store, or what the mortgage is going to cost, or whatever. There's so much that's outside of our locus of control, and that contributes to a very frustrating and damaging environment in which to live.
Well, exactly. And then...
Sheree, I don't mean to jump in, but we've got questions just piling up, and we're already
really?
40 minutes into it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Okay. Yes, please. Okay, here is a good one. With the Earth changes moved into an accelerated cycle, with storms and movements becoming more intense, would it be safe to assume there will come a point in the next few months or in the next few years when the changes are so intense it becomes undeniable for the masses, or will there be more of a gradual process with no sudden jumps?
That's hard to say, because when it comes to things being undeniable to the masses, it depends on who has control of the mainstream media.
Right.
It depends on how things are spun, because it's always possible to create a denial. I mean, there are still people who think that certain events that we have, absolute photographic and videological proof of never happened.
Right. But you know what, though? The paradigm is starting to break, and a lot of people are realizing that the mainstream media is just propagating propaganda, and a lot of people are losing trust in the mainstream media. So it may not necessarily be a question of who controls the mainstream media, but rather where our consciousness level is to be able to weed out the disinformation. Sooner
or later, things will become self-evident. They won't have a choice in becoming self-evident. However, the point at which that's going to be, or the final straw that breaks the camel's back, I really couldn't say.
Okay. Let me go to another one. There have been many people who have come out publicly, such as Susan Joy Renison, who has tried to warn world government about the incoming space energy and the potential for catastrophic failure to our electric grids. Have the ETs or IDs talked about contingency plans if the grid system goes down under considerable distress, or are such effects being addressed now? And are there any reasons to worry?
The incoming energy isn't necessarily negative. I mean, just because mainstream science doesn't understand it doesn't mean it's going to hurt you.
Okay.
In fact, it's part of a completely natural process that is linked with the transition, so to speak, the transition to the next dimension, which I know those listeners who have listened to Tolek will have become somewhat familiar with. That energy is part of that whole process. There might be some temporary effects on our systems. However, I know that efforts are being put in place both terrestrially and extraterrestrially to ensure that critical infrastructure is not damaged or disrupted by this. The things that support human life are going to be maintained.
Okay.
So there's really no need to panic. There's no need to fear. In fact, anybody who's giving you information about this that is spun from a fear perspective, what they're trying to do is get you to generate disaster through your own fear. So don't give in to that and quit those sources. They don't help you.
That makes sense.
I've heard it mostly coming from scientists, such as our good friend Brooks Agnew, who has discussed solar flare activity and the possibility that we could get hit with one of these solar flares. It could knock out our satellite systems, thus knocking out our grids.
Well, it wouldn't be a permanent thing, and like I said, critical infrastructure is being protected and maintained.
Okay.
So there's no reason to get alarmed over the unknown.
Okay. There's been some talk that the true Illuminati, the ones that came up with the plans for the New World Order 300 plus years ago, are indeed dead as their bodies were, not able to handle the changes in frequency over the past few years. And in fact, it is the current politicians and inbred families who have tried to take their place in the power vacuum. Can you confirm?
We have not found any evidence that this is the case. We have found still active behind the scenes action going on.
Okay.
So I don't know. I would have to say my own personal experiences in this matter indicate that this is probably not correct.
I agree with you. I haven't seen Kissinger in a while, and he just popped up on a video that I was watching today, a very recent video,
Right.
and he's still old and decrepit, and he's still doing.
Well, some
what
of the
he's doing.
clones are starting to break down. So some of those public figures. Now you have to understand with the structure, the public figures are never the ones calling the shots.
Of course.
Right.
Some of the public figures are becoming less public, and part of that is because the clones are breaking down.
Okay.
I never thought about it from that perspective, but I have noticed some significant changes in personalities and also in appearance between people. There was a video, and this just came to mind just now. I don't know if you have any insight on this, but Osama bin Laden, for instance, back in 2004, 2003, he released a video. He was gray. He had a longer beard, and then they put out another video in 2006 or something like that, and he looked a lot younger, and he had black hair as opposed to gray hair. And I've often wondered, is that an actor that they injected in there, or is it a clone?
Could be. I don't know. In that case, could be clone, could be actor, could be an excellent makeup artist. You know, it's like who was doing Saddam Hussein's dye jobs when he was living in that spider hole. The big joke that was circulated when they finally quote unquote caught him.
He had 80 doubles. There's no way that they executed the right guy. They probably sent him off to
Honestly,
some
I don't
island.
think, a lot of these guys who've been public boogeymen, I'm not entirely sure that they ever catch who they say they catch.
No, they don't. I'm right there with you on that. Another question. You recently mentioned there could be up to 50 biospheres in our system. How many of those
that was Sunfire who mentioned that, but yes, I'm familiar.
Okay. How many of those do you anticipate will be noticeable in our skies when Earth shifts to 4D? Also,
4D, I would say all of them.
Okay.
Well, those that are close enough to be visible anyway, and large enough to be visible. I mean, Jupiter is visible in our skies, but it looks like just another star. So some of these will just look like that.
I've had Tolik on many, many times before, and he's talked about the biospheres, but I'm not quite sure exactly what they are. Can you elaborate a little bit on those?
Well, yeah, and Tolik has some files that will actually give a lot of information on these. But what biospheres are planet-sized spherical vessels that are designed for long-term life and travel in space.
Okay.
And they range inside from some that are maybe planetoid size like Pluto to some that are as large or larger than Jupiter. Now, obviously, they are not as dense as Jupiter, so they won't have the same gravitic effects as Jupiter. And most of them are using inertial compensators. That means that they won't have a deleterious gravitic effect on nearby planetary objects, asteroids and whatnot. So, it's not a matter of Nibiru going to come swooping down and shake you up, because that doesn't exist. Most of these planet-like objects seen in the sky are not Nibiru or Planet X or anything like that, but just biospheres, and they're nothing to get panicked about.
Is it possible that Earth is a biosphere in that sense? Because the way that it was perfectly placed around the sun, if we were just a little bit closer, it would be too hot. If it was a little bit further, it would be too cold.
Earth has changed, or rather I should say, Earth has been moved in its orbit several times. At one time it occupied the orbit that Venus has, and it was not uninhabitable. The notion that planets become uninhabitable completely by changing the position of the orbit is incorrect. Life does find a way, and many planets will deliberately sustain life even if they have farther out orbits. We're talking out there. There are inhabited planets. Every single planet in this solar system is inhabited at some dimension. So even if it would strike us as being uninhabitable by our kind of life, it is still inhabitable to someone somewhere.
That makes sense.
Planets are alive and they enjoy carrying life.
Right, like Mars has the rat on it.
Oh, did you see that recent photo? It was on NASA's website. They're admitting that it's not Photoshop, nothing at all, and they found a rat on the surface of Mars, or a guinea pig
on the surface of Mars. I wonder if it's a native Martian rat or if it came through something else off ship.
Well, I thought too. My other thought was, well, maybe a rat just got onto the Mars set. Maybe that's just pictures we're seeing from here from Earth.
A possibility. It is a possibility.
That is also a possibility.
Wouldn't put it past them at this point.
Let me see. Let me go on to a couple more questions. I think you already covered this, but I'm going to ask this anyways. There's some people that are convinced that Anunnaki stories such as Sitchin's work and Nibiru coming back are all fabrications of their deceptive intent, and they play a bigger role in the stories told in all major religious doctrines.
Sunfire knows a website that really helps debunk the Sitchin information. I think it's 2012 hoax or something like that. Anyhow, there's some websites out there with very good information about why Sitchin is not something you should really be worried about, and why that whole panic scenario is not something that you should be worried about. I will say that the Anunnaki were real. They were also not anywhere near as hyped up, or what they were hyped up to be. Yeah. They were the, I guess you could call them the rough equivalent of interstellar joyriders who happened to cross our planet at an inopportune, or opportune for them, time, and came down, partied a bit, got thrown off by us, and, said, "We'll be back," and then never managed to achieve that.
Well, I find
and now are incapable of achieving that, in fact.
I find a lot of inspiration in that story, though, because if you realize that we were created as slaves to mine gold, as according to Sitchin, then you can realize that, hey, you're a slave. Now that you know you're a slave, you can free yourself. But without that understanding that you are a slave, then you can't free yourself, because the most hopelessly enslaved is the one that believes he's free.
Yeah, we were not created to be slaves. We are slaves right now. We're slaves to our society, and we're slaves to our social system and our cultural system and all of those. We were not created to be slaves. We were created free and equal human beings. The Anunnaki came down, modified us, took some of us as slaves, and did stuff like that, but they did not create us.
Oh, of course. They genetically engineered.
Humans on this planet are the result of voluntary colonization. This planet was created for this. It wasn't that they were coming down and colonizing something that already had intelligent life on it and displacing some other species. But this planet was specifically created and put here to be a voluntarily colonized by 24 distinct human species, none of which were created as slaves. In order for them to basically interbreed and intermix genetically and culturally, in order to basically create one big happy society. Now, that was disrupted.
Yes, it definitely
that
was.
That experiment did not pan out, and it wasn't because the experiment was flawed. It was because things outside the experiment intervened.
Well, I think you're referring to the reptilians, and that's another question on my mind, is that I would imagine as you move up in the understanding of consciousness, then you start to become more and more benevolent, because you realize that what your actions affect others, and then you start to build an even deeper empathy. And it's hard to imagine an interstellar race like reptilians, or even interdimensional, that have achieved that type of technology and that type of understanding, but still don't have the heart and the empathy that comes along with achieving that higher state of consciousness.
This comes from a mistaken assumption that duality ends in the near dimensions. I have to say, from experiences actually interacting with other dimensionals, that yes, you find that the good people get gooder, the further up you go. The neutrals even get gooder the further up you go, and even the not so nice people get a little bit better. But negative and positive exist at every level up until you get to a point where there is no more duality, and I really don't know if I could put a number on that or say exactly where it is. And that those who seek to take advantage of others also exist to a very high level. We have found reptoids from the 3rd to the 6th density. And we found, that's the Draco and the Hydra. We found other negative reptoids higher than that who are not the Draco and the Hydra. But yeah, things like that exist at a higher level. What changes is the fact that it's a lot easier to choose not to come into contact with that.
Okay, fair enough. I've had a few abduction situations in my life. When I was a child, my mother took me. It got so bad she took me to a psychiatrist because I kept telling her that these little ETs were coming into my room. And, of course, they tried to convince me that it wasn't real. And then 10, 15 years went by, no experiences. And then I started having those experiences again. I still don't want to say that they were real experiences because there's a possibility that they were dreams. However, every time I've encountered these beings, they have been about 6 or 7 feet tall. They look like the Greys, except very tall. They're wider, and they move a little. It's kind of liquidy. Does that fit a description of any of the beings that you were aware of?
Yeah, there's a certain race of Greys from Andromeda or from the galaxy Andromeda, that match that description. They're generally not considered friendly, and they're not here by the permission of anybody, that's for sure.
Okay. My experience with them is that they weren't too concerned with my comfort level, but they weren't trying. They were taking care not to hurt me, but they
weren't deliberately trying to hurt you, but they weren't exactly concerned either.
Exactly, and their primary focus was extracting information from my mind. Yeah,
not exactly friendly, but not necessarily deliberately harmful.
Like scientists.
We don't consider them to be friendlies.
Okay. I've always wondered because I've tried calling them again, and I would love to be able to speak to them because every time I encounter them, they put me in this state of it's in between awake and asleep. It's a very
a trance-like state.
A trance state,
no,
exactly.
They're probably not interested in actually having discourse with you because they don't see you as a sentient being.
Ah, okay.
That's the unfortunate fact of the matter is you're better off trying to deliberately contact one of the positive groups because, hey, they'll treat you like a human being and talk back.
Okay. Because that's one thing that the experience has always left me with is this sense of being violated in the point where how dare you take me, put me in this trance state, and then not even let me communicate with you and treat me less than what I am.
It's really unfriendly.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's take the quick top of the hour. Tanaath talks about earth changes and shifting, and it's hard to tell if this is an energetic thing or if this is a physical thing or possibly both. Is it a physical pole shift? Is it the energies that are changing, causing all of this crazy weather? Tanaath, what is your take?
It's both.
Both? Okay.
Yeah, what we have, don't panic over pole shifts. We have been, the whole notion of a pole shift in our popular discourse has emphasized sudden, rapid, catastrophic change. That's actually, again, another fear manipulation attempt to try to get you to manifest that with your fears.
That's what
pole
we
shifts,
thought, yeah.
They occur, and it's actually shifting. It has been shifting for the last decade.
Right.
And longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an overnight thing. It's not like wake up tomorrow morning and find your house 10 feet underwater when before you were 800 meters above sea level. We have time to react, and it's not going to kill you.
Right. And I think it's gotten to the point now where not as many people are dying during these events. And it started late 2011. It was several months after the Japan earthquake. And the Japan earthquake was, I think, the impetus. It was the, crescendo of the entire Earth changes set of
No,
events.
that was induced. Sorry, that one was induced.
You-
They've caught the people who did it too. That one was induced, and it was induced for a very specific reason to basically to threaten the government of Japan.
Right.
Well, it moved,
at that time.
It was able to move the Earth a couple of feet off of its axis, which takes a lot of strength, and so that's shocking.
It does. There are friendly species involved helping to redistribute some of the forces so that these don't happen in quite so catastrophic ways. The forces still have to move. They still have to go somewhere and do something. But to an extent, we can influence that so that instead of seeing millions die, you reduce casualties to a bare minimum.
Right.
For instance, and then there's been some cases where, like, for whatever mysterious reason, a quake or an earth movement of a magnitude that should have had massive casualties for its location just didn't. Think of the earthquake in Mexico City last year. Mexico City has millions of people and is not exactly known for its high buildings code standards.
Mm-hmm. There was another one.
A handful of people died. That's it.
Oh, there was an 8.0 down, or 9.0 down in Singapore, near Singapore, in the same area where they had the tsunami in 2004 or 2003. Was it 2003, 2004? 2004, I think. And nobody died. It was like there were hardly any deaths.
Well, let me
maybe
ask
some
you
property damage, but hey, property is not life.
Let me ask you this. We've noticed a lot of things going on here in Colorado. The parking lots are coming apart. Our parking lot outside, for instance, is coming apart. I noticed it down the street as well. However, we're not feeling any earthquakes or tremors. Any insight into what can possibly be going on?
Well, Colorado is, it could be the result of earth changes. It could also be the result of things going on underneath. We'll say that.
Yeah,
that is true. I never thought about that.
We had an earthquake a few years back, and I remember we were out on our patio, and we were on the third floor at the time, and all of a sudden we felt this wave, and it was like, it wasn't an earthquake, it was a wave. And I was like, what was that? You know, that was kind of weird. Then we found out later that there was a 5.3 earthquake, and we were just, and I believe
it was on the other side of the state, though.
Yeah, but I believe we asked Tolek about that.
Yeah, he'd probably be a pretty good source on that particular incident. I do know that, like, people have been reporting strange sounds around the world, and back in January, I did hear this where I was when I was at my former rural location, and to me, it sounded like distant industrial and horn music. It was actually very, very musical, but there was that metallic element to it.
It sounded like metal scraping.
Like old school 9 Inch Nails.
I keep hearing
industrial shop sounds. And that was actually, it's coming from deep, deep movement quite far beneath the surface of the earth. But it sounds like it's coming from the sky because it's being reflected back down to us from the sky.
Let me ask you this. Another question here.
Yeah.
Are there any plans to remove the human cabal from Terra, or will they remain, but in a limited fashion?
They're not going to remain. They're not going to remain in power. But honestly, some of this has to come from Terrans as well, right? When it comes to the human cabal, it's within Terran power to remove them and decide what to do with them.
I say hang them in the street.
Right, but what should we?
We would like to prevent spilling of blood.
Exactly.
Now, note I phrased this very specifically. Spilling of blood.
Right. That's why a hanging would be in order.
Ritually.
Terrible.
This is why hanging is a good solution.
He's
and
terrible.
This is why it's better to reach for something like abortion. Abortion in itself is a murky moral issue, one that I'm not going to get into. But I gotta say, if you're going to do it, you would much rather do it through chemical methods than something that involves the shedding of blood.
Right. Exactly.
Because that's not going to help anyone.
Mm-hmm. I hear groups on almost a weekly basis now calling for a revolution, even if it's bloody, because they're saying, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. But I say
that's just a truism. It doesn't actually
exactly.
make it correct.
It doesn't make it correct. Exactly. That's the game plan we've always followed, and it's always led to just slaughter and then chaos and then order out of chaos.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm a very peaceful person, but even I'm getting pushed to the point to where it's okay. We've got to do something. We've got to stand up, and if the only way is a violent revolution, then so be it. That's the way we have to go. And it's unfortunate because we live in a democracy in the truest sense of the form. We live in a spiritual and psychological democracy where the masses and the collective consciousness is dictating reality to the rest of us. And no matter how awake we are as individuals, we can change our own personal reality. But on a global perspective, if these other people don't get their stuff together here pretty soon, we're going to be doomed.
Oh, I wouldn't say doomed. Let me just say things find a way to turn out. There is such a thing as synchronicity, and it does find its way into things. And anybody who's followed some of Carrie Cassidy's work knows that when it comes to things like Looking Glass, the harder they pushed to try to pull one outcome, the further that outcome ran, like, a giggling child down the hallway that you can't catch. The universe finds a way.
That is true.
Yep.
Even when things look terrible, it doesn't mean that that's what's going to be happening, right? Mm-hmm. Maintain positive outlook and positive thought, and don't give in to fear.
Right.
That is true. I've heard that the universe is like a river, and you throw a stone into it, and the river's going to move around that stone, but it's going to go right back on its course the quickest way that it can. And what we're doing is trying.
And if you try to divert the river, well, you'd better be very, very, very good at it, which, at this level, they're not.
We need to recruit some beavers.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, we got some of those in Canada.
Well, I think we should hire some nuclear radiation reducing beavers, because what do y'all plan on doing about the radiation situation?
Well,
There's
hold on.
Existing technologies on the planet right now that can deal with that. They're just not being used because, well, certain people want large quantities of us to die. Certain existing scalar technologies can be used to deradiate stuff that would take trillions of years naturally in a matter of hours.
See, I have a problem with the way that you phrased that question, Cherie, because you just asked, what are y'all planning to do about the radiation? It's not their responsibility. It's our responsibility. We have to do something.
We do get involved, yes. And that's why I emphasize that there is already existing technology on the Earth that can do this. It isn't being used because the people in power want this radiation all over the place.
What do you think about the possibility of terraforming the planet for some others, maybe even the reptilians, to inhabit this planet at one point in time? We had a very strange caller.
That's been ongoing. That's been a lot of what the pollution and burning of fossil fuels. We've had technologies that can replace fossil fuels and fossil fuel power generation as energy for a long, long time. But not only are fossil fuels a good way to divest people from income, fossil fuels are also part of the terraforming attempt, essentially. And all this pollution and waste and stuff like that, it's terraforming. It makes this reptilians like deserts. They like hot, dry deserts. That might be why they tend to then have to go elsewhere to get food, because they like living in deserts so much, and they don't have sustainable power production, so they can't replicate the food they need. So they just make a desert, then go off, find another population, make a desert, go off, find another population. Yeah, there's been, you look at all the desertification going on. It is clear there is a terraforming attempt going on this planet, and it has been going on for a while.
We had a caller a few years ago that he said that he worked in a military base and that their mission was to terraform the planet for these extraterrestrials. And I said, well, if you're a human and you're doing this, why are you doing it? And he says, hey, because I don't care. I'm not going to be here when all this takes place, and I get to live really nice right now. And I didn't know if it was a prank caller or if maybe he was being sincere. I don't know, but it was very strange. He sounded very sincere.
What's the word I'm looking for? Amortize it to the children. That kind of mentality is encouraged by the powers that, well, you can call them the powers that were, or whatever you want. That kind of mentality is highly encouraged because people then don't do what's necessary, or are much more willing to do things that have terrible long-term consequences against everybody's best interest. And when you don't realize that, hey, you are also going to be your children at some point, they're thinking, oh, okay, I'll live nicely now and I'll never have to deal with it. Wrong. If you get born again on this planet, you'll be dealing with, you'll be living in your own shit then, pardon my language.
I know what you mean completely. Mm-hmm. And I hope to God that I don't come back to this godforsaken planet because I'm ready for more.
Frankly, I'm saying things are going to change before it gets to that point, but that's the mentality that fuels that kind of action.
This is a good question that kind of goes on this topic. Do you know if the reincarnation trap is mostly gone? Also, can you give your perspective on how the idea of karma might have been manipulated by the negative forces?
Yes, the reincarnation trap is mostly gone. As for karma exists, but it exists on a macro level, not a micro level. It is not the tit-for-tat accounting system that it is made out to be. It's not a matter of, oh my God, I ate beef, I'm going to hell, or, oh my God, I cut that guy off in traffic, I'm going to have to expiate this in the next life, or, anything like that. When we talk about karma is understood to be a real thing. It's self-evident. It is on a species and cultural and societal level, the fact that you reap what you sow. It might not be right away, but it comes around. So for instance, for the reptilians and the cabal, karma, the consequence of karma would be they tried to do to others and they're going to be not anymore in existence in that form, or be able to do that anymore because of it. When it comes to individual karma, this is, say you had the opportunity to do something and you chose to do something else that was very, very damaging. At some point, you will have to face the consequences of that. There's no getting around it. It might not be right away. It might not be in your current form or your current incarnation, but sooner or later, individuals will force themselves, or synchronicity will force them to come to terms with things they did, things they omitted, things they neglected, that kind of thing.
I'm glad to hear that, because when it comes to beef, I'm worse than a tyrannosaur. I love to eat meat, and I feel, as the consciousness expands, I start to feel a little bit worse. Although I do thank the spirit for every time I do, but still, it's but on a universal karma though, I do hope that there's some repercussions, because some of these people really need to feel what they're making others feel, and I think that's what it's all about, is empathy and learning empathy. And if you can't learn empathy, then you can't move forward, and you're thus keeping us collectively backwards.
Yeah, like the individuals that have been part of the apparatus of control are reaping are accruing some pretty massive karma, which means that they're going to have a lot of lifetimes in which to come to experience what they forced upon others.
I hope so. It's kind of bad. I shouldn't hope anything negative on anybody, but
and the thing about this is it's not a matter of some outside entity deciding to punish. It is synchronistic, natural forces at play.
Right.
So it's not like somebody arbitrarily decided that this is going to get, this is worthy of a karmic punishment. You also get the opposite kind, the good karma kind, which means that if you if you act in ways that are positive and that encourage growth and encourage plenty, then you tend to have lives that permit more of that. If you act in ways that are negative and repressive and destructive, then you'll have lifetimes to continue. Although you might not be the one who is doing, you might be the one who is getting done too.
Right.
King for a day, slave for lifetimes.
I completely agree with that. I've always said that it's not some being that's going to judge you afterwards. It's going to be yourself, and it's like weight. If you have too much weight, you sink to the bottom. If you don't have the weight, then you can float to the top, or you can float up to a higher level. But it's not some being in white, sitting on a throne, pointing his finger at you while all of his followers are laughing at you. That never made any sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, no, nobody punishes you for making free will decisions. You punish yourself sometimes, but
right.
And if you do something, actions have consequences. Other people with free will might decide to take exception if you do something really nasty.
Right.
And that's part of what's going on right now.
There is some speculation that it's HAARP that's being used to prevent the planet from expanding and raising itself consciously. Would you agree with that statement? And also,
No.
How is HAARP? No? Okay.
Not HAARP.
If
anything's doing that, it's not HAARP.
Okay. I guess that makes the next question irrelevant. Let's see. I've got a lot of good questions here. People are just sending them off in the chat room. Do you concur with Tolek's conviction that ascension to 4D will happen in January 2014?
I've stated this multiple times. We don't do timelines. We don't do dates. Sorry.
I'm right there with you. Every time I've heard a date and I've followed that date, it's always disappointed me. So, yeah.
I won't do it. Sorry. Nope.
Truth is relative. What do you feel about Hermetic principles?
Truth, I wouldn't say that, well, yes. Truth is relative in that this is a multiverse. There is room enough for everybody's personal truths without conflict or overlap. However, in the process of co-creating our universe, we agree to accept to at least some degree the truths of others in order to be able to interact with them.
Okay.
So you can have your own truth all to yourself if you don't ever want to interact with anything else, ever. Otherwise, you're going to have to at least accept some imposition of others' truth.
I agree with you, and there is definitely many different levels of truth. If you go and talk to the regular Joe Blow American Idol listening or watching person, then their truth really is that there are these jihadist Islamics around every corner looking to kill them, and that's the truth that they've understood. But you're right, they have to take that next leap over and see the other truths in order to get to the place to where they realize, hey, wait a minute,
I'm
a
they got to be
spiritual
careful
being.
not to manifest that either.
Right.
If that's all they're dwelling on, well, oh man, what an awful way to live, honestly. To live entirely in fear every minute, thinking something is coming to kill you.
Oh, I know.
I mean, you're likely to kill yourself that way.
I know.
Through stress reactions.
I was listening to a certain radio show host for a few years, and every day there was this impending sense of doom, and I thought the world was going to come crashing down. And when I disconnected myself from that, then all of a sudden something changed within myself, and I started feeling a lot better. So you're right. You can't constantly obsess over things like that.
Radio/internet television host who's known for yelling at his listeners. That he does get some good information out there of what's actually going on that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know about, but he does not hesitate to scream at you in every single broadcast that they are coming to kill you.
They're coming to kill you,
honestly,
scum.
Yeah, they're coming to kill you, and they're going to break down your door, and they're going to kill you and kill your family. No, that is not the case. Somebody who emphasizes that over and over and over and over again is doing something to you that is not in your best interests. You're better off switching to another source that doesn't emphasize the fear and the disaster and the mayhem. Plus, he never talks about the actual positives that have happened, the actual progress that has made. It's always
Right.
a emphasis on the negative that's occurring, and they're going to kill you and come take your family and kick down your door and feed your dog arsenic and all kinds of things, and maybe even burn your Christmas tree and tip over your rose bush. It's ridiculous.
Oh my God, that was the best rant ever. But on the flip side, though, let me play devil's advocate for a moment. Do you think that is serving a purpose, though? Because I know that when I was first awakened to this information, I wasn't quite ready for the consciousness, for the higher understandings. Yet the anger that I felt once I realized all of this is exactly what he projects.
Something about it, yes. If you are capable of getting past the fear and the anger and moving on to the okay, now what? The now what thing. He never ever addresses the now what, but individuals are capable of going now what, and then realizing, okay, well, this commentator is not addressing progress, not addressing how to actually fix this and move on and start fixing it themselves. It's okay from that standpoint. The problem is that it's all the people who are never capable of busting out and going into the now what. They're sitting there continuing to manifest this fear, and that's what makes it so damaging and harmful.
I completely agree. And just a disclaimer, because we're on GCN on Saturdays and Sundays, we're talking about Glenn Beck here.
I'm talking about someone else. I'm talking about somebody I've got in mind, but
no, I know who you're talking about. But just a disclaimer: we're talking about Glenn Beck, nothing more.
Glenn Beck, yeah. We'll leave it at that.
After Terra goes to 4D, what will happen to all the clones and PLFs, programmable life forms?
Those are no longer able to maintain their integrity, and they cease. Sometimes in very spectacular fashions.
What technologies and or current systems will not be in 4D?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
What technologies or current systems will not be in 4D?
Well, we probably won't be burning fossil fuels, and
or
while I'm sure the internal combustion engine may technically actually still work, and then again it might not. Electricity still exists and functions. Whether our current stuff will work exactly the same or whether it'll have to be retooled, I don't know. I'm not a physicist. So,
now, is it 4D that we're moving into or 5D? Because we've had several different people and they have different perspectives, and the perspective of moving into 5D is that we skip every two. So we from 3D to 5D.
No, you don't skip two. If you skipped any at all, there wouldn't be any need for sequential dimensions.
Okay.
Nobody skips a grade. Some people, when they say 5D, are arguing from a standpoint that we're already in 4D. Some people, when they say 4D, argue from a standpoint that we're already in 3D. Regardless of what you call it, we are moving to the next consecutive stage. There is no skipping the grade. That kind of defeats the purpose of going through them in the first place. It's not like school where if you somehow happen to be really, really, really good at math or something, that they'll put you up the next year or something. No. It's a sequence, and it goes in a sequence, and it's physically impossible to skip.
That makes sense.
Now, those who are already coming down and who've nerfed themselves in order to come here will go back to where they were, and that might be the 5th, or that might be the 6th, or that might be who knows what. But native Terrans who started out 3D will be going 4.
What do you think about Dolores?
And the planet itself will be going 4.
What do you think about Dolores Cannon's idea that some of us, have come down from the higher dimensions in order to help the people of this dimension, and therefore we just can't quite grasp the hate and the anger that this dimension is full of because we have come down from a higher dimension and we're not of this nature?
Okay, so now that is a loaded question. It's I do agree with the proposition that some of us have come from higher dimensions to help. I do agree with the proposition that a lot of us are really just bewildered by the hatred. I disagree with the proposition that that hatred is a product of the third dimension itself, because we have seen other third dimensional civilizations that do not have that vitriol and that hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen higher dimensional civilizations which do, namely the reptoids, among others. You know, those are the big example that comes to mind. So that would be, I guess, my response to that. Those of us who come from higher dimensional positive societies and those of us who come from three-dimensional positive societies find this place absolutely bewildering.
Horrifying.
Now, some of us are able to comprehend how it came to be this way and why, and the kind of the societal and psychological underpinnings that produce this.
Right.
I'm a sociologist by trade, and studying sociology helped me come to terms with this because it explained a lot. And then when I activated and I found out, you know, the truth of what's going on, it was like, oh, that explains everything.
Hey, I studied sociology as well. So,
yeah, I actually went and got a master's degree in it. I loved it that much. Now, I don't do anything with it now, but
yeah, you
hey,
do.
It helped made me a little more human.
Yeah, you do. You do what you do, and it obviously is helping people, because our chat has just been loaded with people, and we can tell you are genuine, and you have a really good energy about you, which is something that, you know, we look for in guests that we have on the show multiple times, because we like to feel people out. And we use a lot of intuition in our relationship and in the work that we do. And
yeah, I take I guess you could almost call it like an energetic print of people when I speak to them, when I hear their voice, and that tells me whether or not they're genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why certain commentators make me just want to switch off and roll my eyes and go, "Oh, protect my rose bush."
Well, you know what? I have the same intuition, except for it's with faces. I can look at a face, and even children, and I know this sounds horrible, but I've done this before, and after a few years, the child grows up and is exactly the way I thought it would be. You can just tell these bad spirits or good spirits. It's very, very strange.
In the voice.
Yeah.
And if I'm close enough to interact physically, or, you know, within range of sight distance, I can often feel it in, I guess you could call it, the energetic field of that person. And there's some things like I'm very verbal. Talking, writing, those are my chosen forms of communication. I'm not visual at all. I have trouble remembering people's faces. I have trouble recognizing things I can't visualize at all. There's, you know, what I'm looking at is what my mental pictures look like. But when it comes to anything text or spoken, that's where I get my information from, and I can get a lot of information from it.
Mm-hmm. That's where I am. Yep.
Yeah, and you know, you can see stuff sometimes. You can see, or feel rather, the stuff imprinted into certain texts or into certain live or recorded vocal stuff. You can feel it, the frequency. I've been to websites where the words themselves were not upsetting, but there was just so much bad mojo shoved behind it that it was like hideous to behold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where I had to put psionic shield up between me and it because it was like that affecting.
Wow.
Let me go back to the 3D realm here for a second, because we touched upon something and I wanted to ask you about this. The negative energies and the hate and jealousy and anger and all of this that we feel as humans or during the human experience, there seems to be a couple of different levels, at least on this planet. We have the human species, and then we have the animal kingdom. And in the animal kingdom, you don't find the jealousy and hate and rage, although you do find animals murdering each other, sometimes over territory or food or whatnot, but they don't seem to have a certain element that we do, which makes us even more evil. So where does this negativity come from? Is it in our DNA? Is it reptilian DNA? Or
the origin of evil. This is an excellent question. I have to say that all of the humans species that contributed to this experiment were positive, meaning that they did not tend to have this evil within them. There are evil human species out there, and we don't really understand how or why or anything like that, what created or caused that effect, any more than we understand what created or caused good people. We're grateful that there are good people, and so many of them. But when it comes to evil in the human species, this was introduced, and this was introduced mostly by the reptilians.
That makes sense. I mean, to me, it's very simple. Do you want that other person to treat you the way that you're about to treat them? It's a very simple question that you ask yourself when you interact with anybody. And it's not even, a conscious thing. It's just something in the subconscious, and it's due to empathy. But I guess some people have that disconnect there where they don't ask themselves, do I want this other person to treat me in the way that I'm about to treat them?
Mm-hmm. And, when it comes into, say, the difference between negativity and evil, because evil is not always, negative is not always evil. There are negatives who are not evil. They're just selfish. Mm-hmm. And as long as you understand what motivates them, you can prevent yourself from being harmed by them, because they won't go out of their way to harm you. No, evil is this seething maliciousness. And we've observed it, and we don't understand it. And we've even seen light-oriented beings who have still this seething maliciousness. For them, the notion of the greater good is making everybody else their way. And they're not afraid to harm in order to do this. It's, it's evil actions with, underpin, with a philosophy behind it that sounds good but isn't.
Well, I think that's the same kinds of people that you see running the Vatican, or running the Pentecostal movement, or running, Pat Robertson, on CBN. They may actually have been at one point good people that, really wanted to help people and counsel people and stuff. Then their hearts turned more and more to evil.
Well, I think some people see empathy as a weakness.
Right.
And so they try to move away from that. It's completely backwards, in my opinion, though. It feels like taking on so much weight that when you leave this realm that you're going to sink downwards rather than go upwards. And I always thought the point was to go up and to return back to source.
Well, you don't want to race, it's not a race to non-exist. Let's put it that way. Existence exists to exist, so have fun. You're here for a reason. You're here to exist. But one thing, that actually really, really deeply amused me here is this announcement from the new Pope that even good people, anybody who isn't a Christian, if they're still good people doing good things, that they're good regardless of what their creed is. Followed hotly on its heels was the assertion that atheists are still going to hell.
Right. And
atheism is...
So make up your mind.
Atheism, in my opinion, is people that are completely out of touch. I mean...
Atheism is people who, to steal a phrase coined on the internet, rage quit belief.
Right. It seems like it's embedded in my heart that there's a creating force behind all of this. Right. It's all of us put together. It's our collective spirits which make up this energetic creating force. We are the creators, but atheists who believe that that's it, we're like robots, and when you die, then the light's out, and that's it, no more existence. It doesn't make any sense to me. It feels like some kind of brainwashing, or even from the human disillusionment with the human experience.
Right, and it's the same.
Some of it can be very positivistic and humanist. Secular humanism is an atheistic movement and has, at least in its stated principles, very, very empowering things. The notion is, if this is all you've got, do the right thing. And that's a very beautiful thing.
But the flip side, Anton LaVey is the flip side of that.
Right. Oh,
this is
God,
all you've got, so you do whatever you want because there's no consequences.
Yeah, that's co-opted, clearly.
Right.
And I always saw Satanism as just kind of a catch-all term for selfishness and being a dark-minded individual that just breeds off of dark material and gory stuff, and I've never gravitated towards any of that. I can't even watch horror films depicting people being eviscerated or anything like that. I can't stand to watch things like that. I think that's another aspect of being a starseed, is that you can't even watch stuff like that because it's.
I can deal with. I'm a warrior. I can deal with stuff like that, but not gratuitous stuff like that. Horror films to me are gratuitous. I don't really like them. I don't like the energy they produce.
Right.
I would much rather, if I'm going to do something, I'd much rather hop on to something like World of Warcraft and,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I'm the opposite. It's hard for me to look at the real stuff, but you put me in front of a horror movies like Saw, for instance. Oh my God, I eat that stuff up. I don't know why. But I guess it's because I know that it's not real. And in Saw also, it's the bad guy usually getting what he deserves. So
yeah, Saw 3 you could argue is gratuitous, but
yeah.
It's the gratuitous aspect that really, really bothers me. I do watch these things, and some of them don't bother me. Like, grindhouse films don't bother me because they're comic in their expression of it. And again, I know it's not real.
Right.
The real stuff bothers me, but it doesn't make me want to shut it off and turn it away. It makes me want to do something about it, and that's different.
Well, that's good. That's good because I think a lot of people have lost touch with that, where they just shut it off completely. I fell victim to that for a while. There was about a year there where I just couldn't even look at the stuff because I was feeling it. I was feeling what the victims were going through. And now,
that's hard to have that degree of psionic empathy. It can be very hard to deal with secondary trauma.
I was very off balance for a while, and I was off balance to the positive, which I think is just as detrimental as being polarized to the negative. You've got to have that in-between balance.
Right.
Yeah. And nor will I, stick my head in the sand and only search out the fluffy bunny aspect of life either, because... well, that doesn't accomplish anything, right? That's just passivity. It doesn't. I intend to be a fully active principal as much as possible in my own life.
Let me go to a couple more questions because I want to get everybody's questions from the chat.
Yeah.
Are artificial intelligence still a big part of the control methods? Do artificial intelligence beam information canned as channeled beings to various channelers?
Oh, there's still a lot of channeling going on. Some of it is actively projected by naturally intelligent beings. Some of it is, I guess you could say, canned messages from AIs. When we find them, we cut them out. But the method by which these are, I guess you could say, the distribution network of this is kind of difficult to eradicate completely. So, yes, that's still going on. And there's still, highly malicious individual beings that are involved in this too.
Okay. I've always been skeptical of channeled information because of the technologies that we have here on Earth. The Gwen Towers, for instance. Jesse Ventura spoke about those. And you never know where these are coming from. I understand that the individual uses their intuition to differentiate between artificial and other, but still, I've always been really skeptical about that.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, you don't know the source. With channeled information, okay, I'll give you a contrast. Yeah, with channeled information, you don't know the source. You don't know if it's actually coming from a specific individual. You don't know who or what the originator is. It can say whatever it wants, but you can't necessarily feel that, and you don't necessarily know it for true. Even if they manage to produce some kind of visual effect that convinces you that that is an attempt to convince you that they are who they say they are, In contrast, telepathy, when I have telepathic conversations with, for instance, Mander, my admiral, he projects in spirit down here. I can feel him. I can't see him. Like I said before, I have no visual processing. I can feel him. I can hear him. I can feel his emotions very powerfully. So when he says something, it's a two-way conversation. That's another thing in channeled things. Unless it's specifically set up as a Q&A, it's not a question and answer. It's not a discourse or dialogue or a conversation. It's somebody just vomiting up information onto you, accurate or not. Usually inaccurate, rife with errors, or a spoonful of sugar to make bad medicine go down.
Right.
When speaking with Mander, I hear him. I feel his emotions very powerfully. It's a conversation. He does not pretend to know everything by any stretch of the imagination. If there's something he doesn't know, he's quick to say, I'm not an expert. I don't know. Sorry. It's respectful. It's caring. It's two-way. And it's very, very genuine.
I want to go back to the subject of DMT for just a moment, because I have channeled some information from the DMT realm, but it's never been predictions or anything going on in the physical realm. It's always been things that which are inside of me. For
like
instance,
generalities?
Right. Like messages, look, you need to use your third eye more. You're not using that enough.
Well, that isn't necessarily channeling it. If it is, it's channeling yourself.
Okay.
It's bringing out aspects of the multidimensional consciousness of yourself back down in a form that your third dimensional consciousness can understand.
That makes sense. Because I do encounter beings, and we've encountered a few different types of beings in our DMT experiences, some benevolent, some malevolent. Well, I wouldn't even say malevolent. They were just very upset that we had invaded their space. It was very, very strange, and it was only one experience that we've ever had this way.
What are you doing here?
Exactly.
You're not supposed to be here.
They were cussing us out. What the F are you doing here? You need to get the F out of here. And
my relative's friend who had that experience on Salvia had this very much the same thing. It's like, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. Don't come back. Whereas my brother, he was he walked in onto a party, and they were like, yeah, man, join us.
Wow. Well, I mean, Chris had the same experience. That was what the creepy thing about it was.
Simultaneously, yeah.
It was simultaneous.
Oh yeah. Anybody who denies that this is real needn't look no further than the fact that there are so many simultaneous experiences. And if you try to dismiss this as like mass insanity, I'm sorry, that doesn't fly. There's no such thing as mass insanity.
Right.
Let me go to a couple more questions from the chat. Will our star families be granted permission to make comprehensible contact with us at a reasonable time?
Well, this is, again, it's a loaded question with two different concepts involved. Number one, will your star families be able to make contact with you at some point? Yes, this is the plan. Now, this whole notion about granted permission, it's not a granted permission proposition. Again, this is, falling into the whole paradigm that there is some authority that is handing out permissions or denials. That's not the case. If they can't come, it is not a matter of permission. It is a matter of ability or obstruction, not permission. So I hope that helps answer that question.
I hope so too. I wasn't following along, but I think the listener who asked that may understand. Mm-hmm. Let me go to one more question. Can you ask Tanaath about chanting Nam Myoho Renge Koyo? I don't know if that makes any sense to you. Some of these are over my head.
None whatsoever. Sorry. No.
Okay.
You can ask me about it, but all I hear is the nom and think about lolcats. Sorry.
Fair enough.
When it comes to things like that, it's not the words themselves that do the work. It is the intention behind it, your intention. If you believe that the words have specific meanings and specific effects, they will.
Okay. I agree with that. It is definitely about intent. That's what this whole existence is about, intent. I've heard that many, many times before. Let me go to another question. I've heard talk before. Oh, okay, here we go. I've heard talk before that there are only 11 universes and such, but I believe there are infinite amount of different universes with different beings. With your connection to other universes, can you give your perspective?
There's infinite universes. There's infinite multiverses. Its existence does not end. It goes on infinitely.
Bob Dean once mentioned that when people leave Earth or perhaps ascend, that other beings give them respect for having lived a life or lives on Earth. Is that something that happens? Also,
yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is. This is considered the ultimate school of hard knocks.
It is.
And with the BS that people on this planet have to go to, they are recorded a significant amount of respect for getting out of there, for surviving it, and even if they didn't survive it, for having done it in the first place. What's the next part?
The next part is. I'm sorry, I'm just lost my screen here. What is yours and the host's thoughts on apparently brutal education systems that expect students to be perfect and give little choices, like some Chinese schools supposedly do? That's
another form of cabal mind control. That's my thought of it.
I'm right there with you. I think that any kind of educational structure is a box, and school has been designed to get you to repeat the information. Independent thought is looked down upon and punished, where repeating the information is rewarded, and so therefore it is a box and it's mind control.
Our education systems are highly exploratory because it's only through exploration and experience that you really learn. You can have rote memorization, but whether that information can be then used in innovative fashions is debatable. Some people can sometimes spontaneously make that leap on their own, but most people never do, which is why the deliberate removal of critical thinking from curriculums is so very, very disturbing.
Right. And back to the thing that you said about beings rewarding us for being here. One of the things that I notice when I go on these DMT and ayahuasca experiences is coming back and really feeling the body and really feeling how awkward it is to be in this body, and then the constant pain that we live under sometimes. Cherie suffers from chronic pain. It's not. Do you see? It's not fair. It's like, what the hell were you thinking, universe, when you created these bodies that are in constant pain?
I think we chose
it's
it.
Not right.
They were made that way. They're not supposed to be that way.
Yeah. I think we, and also, I think that we ask for it. I think on a certain level, when we first get in these bodies, before we get in these bodies, we decide, what power level and what strength level, kind of like a video game. What do you want to, be, and who do you want to be? Hot, or do you want to be smart? Do you want to be, healthy, or do you want to be sick? To an extent,
but that's only because on this specific planet, it's generally impossible to be all of it. So we have to sort of pick and choose our poisons, or pick and choose our hex grid,
Right.
On other 3D planets that have human populations, you can be smart, sexy, beautiful, kind, and all around good at everything, without, and athletic at the same time, and talented. Talents may differ between people, but like this requirement to pick and choose, you're right on one level, but that isn't why we came into this. We're required to pick and choose our aspects because the people on this planet are, they only have so many points to put into attributes. We'll say that way.
That makes sense.
The pool has been artificially limited. It's like when you're playing if you've ever played The Sims, you get a certain pool of points that you can choose to put into like this and that and the other thing, friendliness, cleanliness, all of that. Well, it's the pool on other planets is bigger. down here on Earth, we have a very small pool of attributes. We have to pick and choose carefully.
Do you think that when we go into these higher dimensions on dimethyltryptamine and other substances such as that, that we are actually basically toggling God mode in our
in your consciousness? Yes, but you're not able to bring it back. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Right. You're able to bring back learnings and perspectives and forms of thought, but you can't bring back, say, the ability to fly or superhuman strength or, stuff like that.
Well, do you agree?
You can bring back the mind.
Do you agree, though, that genetic mutations can somehow allow for that later on down the line?
Well, at the point of transition, all of that will be fixed. We'll have the full set of attribute points instead of just the little pool we've had to pick. I don't think that, going on, assuming or let's say hypothetically speaking, status quo ad infinitum, genetic engineering and stuff like that ain't going to fix this.
Well, no,
but there are children being born who appear to have a larger pool of attribute points to distribute genetically.
Right. They have an extra strand of DNA, don't they?
Yeah.
So that's we're moving up. I mean, that there's no way around that.
Yeah.
And I think the controllers or the reptilians or whatever you want to call them, these elitists, they are scared to death of these kids. And that's,
why do you think they want to riddle them so bad?
Right.
Riddling, vaccinations, wheat, all these lovely things.
And they want them in the government schools as soon as they turn 3. They want, vaccinations.
Take any pretext to seize those kids from their parents, competent or not.
Right, exactly. And
or encourage that they never get born in the first place.
But ending on a good note, though, they have proven that a population, if it is aware of its population growth's effects on the planet, will self-limit their children. And they will.
Malthus was smoking shit.
Yeah, that's BS. People aren't going to just, rapidly have children when they can't afford them. That's stupid. People are having 1 or 2 children. It's not. It's very uncommon nowadays to have more than that. And I think that we are going to be just fine. We
are going to be just fine. Even if we assume 3D and ad infinitum, we are making changes. We are making progress. It is possible to change society and change our approach and move forward in a positive manner. And we are and will do this. And, given that I hold the transition to be a self-evident, inevitable thing, we only get better from there.
Right. Exactly. There's nowhere to go but up when you're up against a wall.
At the bottom, yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you're up against a wall, and they've got us up against a wall, and we just have to tell them that we're moving up, and they can stay in this, 3D hellhole all they want, that they've created to try to keep us trapped here.
It doesn't have to be like this, and I think the more active and aware of us realize that even within the 3D, that this can be improved. This is an artificial situation.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Can we keep you on just a few minutes longer? Because I still have a few more questions. Okay, excellent. I want to make sure
as long as you're, I don't know if your station will limit you, but
it's our station, so we make the decisions.
Yeah.
we restream Clyde Lewis after this, so we'll just cut Clyde out for a little bit, and we'll rejoin him here in a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. But
I apologize to Clyde. Sorry for bumping you.
Oh, it's okay. He's got many affiliates. I don't think he minds.
Yeah, he doesn't mind.
And I'll be back. I'll be back too.
Excellent. Can we collectively banish 3D and summon 4D?
I don't think that's necessary, really. It's on its way naturally. I mean, you can attempt, and then it's it becomes a chicken or egg question as to whether it happens because you did this, or whether it would have happened anyway, or whether because it happened, you were inclined to do this.
Fair enough. You mentioned
it doesn't hurt to try to intend that. In fact, if you intend that, it might, it might have an effect. It might speed things up.
You mentioned that a race of black-eyed beings eat souls on the May 29th show. Do they destroy the soul, or do they suck the energy out of the soul?
They eat soul energy. They disrupt and shatter that soul in that particular form. The spirit continues. That is eternal, cannot be harmed, can't even be forced to experience harm or pain or any of that. Goes back to source, has to sort of get its bearings again, and then may come back, or comes back eventually in whatever form that it chooses.
Do you have
generally stay away from those if you have a choice. They're not nice guys at all.
Do you have any insight on death? And what I'm getting at is, I understand that there's a reincarnation cycle that we move through, and it seems like there is some kind of memory wipe that takes place when we return back to this physical realm. However, if we're able to move forward beyond this, is there a way to maintain our consciousness to the point where we can remember exactly what's happening here?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so, there's a few questions about that. Death of the physical body is just transition to the next. Death of the soul means you go back to source, and then you have to come out again and get born again, or remanifest it again, or whatever. Generally as a different person, but remembering fully the experiences that your soul has had in other forms. Let's see. Let's go back to the second half of that question again, if you will, about what was it about having conscious remembrance, being able to escape this. The reason why we haven't been able to escape this is largely because of the karma scam and the lords of karma and the reincarnation traps that were set up. Reincarnation is a self-evident phenomenon in the greater universe at every dimension, including the third. On this planet, however, it was set up to funnel people specifically back to this planet. Reincarnation up there is very voluntary. If you decide, I'm going to be born as a Tausetian, you get born as a Tausetian. And then after that life, if you say, oh man, I really, really want to be a Procyon, you get born as a Procyon. Or if you say, oh man, I just like Tauseti so much, I'm going back, and I'm going back, and I'm going, and I know people who have done this for over 1 billion years consecutively. Having so much fun being one thing that they just keep coming back and coming back and coming back. But it's voluntary. It's by choice. Here it was involuntary. People were basically given the equivalent of the drill sergeant scream until, and kept disoriented as to what was going on, and not permitted to sort of get their bearings, and then shunted back immediately to Earth, or taken to processing facilities where they were subject to much deeper conditioning and treatment so that they never really got their bearings again, and then shunted back onto this planet. And the loss of memory occurs somewhere between infancy and around 6 or 7 years of age. And some individuals will choose to remember. Some individuals will choose to reactivate and remember at certain times. I had certain triggers sort of built into my life, multiple ones, so that if one was missed, the other ones would hit, and that way all the things that I had forgotten would come back one way or another at the correct times.
Okay.
So that was something I designed, but I came back voluntarily. Prior to this life, my last human life on this earth was on the west coast, among one of the Salish communities, probably about 300 or 400 years ago. It was before smallpox, just before smallpox. I was a medicine woman. And in that life, when I ended up in the processing facility, when the drill sergeant was screaming at me, I said, screw this, I'm out of here, and I left. And then when I was asked to come back, I said, you've got to be kidding me. I just got out of that place. But I was convinced that this was necessary, so I did come back. But I came back with a lot more provisions in place than when I was subject to the drill sergeant and intimidated into coming back willy-nilly.
What do you think of my first memory? My first real memory was a dream that I had, and waking up from the dream and going to find my stepmom to tell her about it. And basically, I'm just a ball of light, and there's other balls of light on this planet with, water that looks like glass. And we get on a boat to come here. And it's like, and I didn't even remember this dream until I was 15 or 16. And, then I thought about it again later on. But what do you think that means?
Well, first of all, what do I think about that? I think that's really, really cool.
I was 6.
As for what it means, I don't really know, because I'm not you. It's not my experience. So it's hard for me to say that.
Well, I've always had a feeling it was when I first came here, and that
I experience myself as having an actual distinct form in the higher dimensions, though not. But there are intelligent balls of light out there.
Really.
Yeah, if you can think it exists.
What do you think about the twin flame concept? Have you done any?
I think it's very. It's presented as something very, very positive, but it could be very stifling, honestly. This notion that, you've got this other person who you are destined to be with no matter what, no choice in the matter. I don't know. I mean, the idea of twin flames and soulmates, it's all very romantic, but I like having a choice. I mean, it works for the people who it works for, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing. We have a choice, and...
Really? I have a choice?
Yes, you do.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
I wouldn't choose anything else.
Really?
Really.
I think one of the things I don't like is the assumption that you can't have a meaningful, lasting, genuine relationship, romantic relationship with somebody who isn't a soulmate or a twin flame. You can. Love takes root in many soils.
The only thing that I think presents the twin flame argument more powerfully, I guess you could say, is the fact that we got together and we're basically the only couple on alternative media that work together 24/7 and have been doing it for 4 years.
Yeah, that's really neat.
And so
I like it. It's very romantic.
And it all stemmed from a conversation we had when we, discovered that we were twin flames. And we even have had DMT experiences where we're collectively, we're just like fountains of light. And we both had the same experience, same time. So we know what we are. That's established. The thing I'm worried about is that people like the Esalen Institute, they come along and then they turn it into a fad, and they turn it into something.
Oh yeah,
that cheapens it.
Yes, and even back when I was in high school, I had a friend who was, I was awake at the time, he was awake at the time, like we were aware of who and what we were. And he was constantly convinced that every girl he dated was his soulmate.
Yeah, I've met those.
And it really turned me off the whole concept.
Right.
Because, later on I realized, and I was with somebody at the time who was my soulmate, and we realized that despite the fact that we were soulmates and we loved each other and always would, we weren't necessarily, it wasn't necessarily in both of our best interests to be with each other.
Well,
sometimes these things can, just because you've been with someone for 14,000 years doesn't mean that you have to stay that way. Although, as I understand it, the twin flame thing is a little bit deeper than the soulmate. But I'm just wondering if maybe twin flame is kind of like a more modernized recreation of the same concept. It's just saying, oh, no, ours is different. It's better. It's real.
Well, twin flames, this is...
But that the phenomena exists is real.
This is the way that I understand it, that the souls, when they came to Earth, they split one more time. And it was that splitting that caused that the twin flames are. And once you meet your twin flame, at least according to what I've read, then you know that this is the last life, and you move on together. And when you move on together, then you become one soul again and reclaim a broken piece of you, I guess.
Well, in that case, my twin flame would be the one I think of as my brother, my non-physical brother, because I distinctly remember... Well, we distinctly remember separating into two individual beings, but that wasn't when we came to Earth. That was when we came into this universe.
Oh, yeah.
It could be universal, yeah.
I think it's universal.
As opposed to a soulmate, which is, we have many, many different soulmates in this life. Some are evil. Well, not evil. Some are negative. Some are positive.
Right.
And some of them are here to be your adversaries in order to help you on your path of growth.
Well, that certainly fits with my experience with the person who I refer to as my soulmate. There were three of us in this little grouping, and sometimes two of us were married, and sometimes one of us was the kid, and sometimes we were killing each other, and it was just this constant cycle of various revisitings of our configurations of relation.
Right.
Exactly.
On and on and on. And in this life we met and we're like, okay, yeah, let's not do this anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
Like you get together and you say, okay, this lifetime I'm going to be the bad guy and I'm going to teach you this because you taught me that last time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in this lifetime we quit.
Right. That's where I hope I am now. I hope that I get to see more than just this realm. I'm ready for more. The ascension thing, though, I've heard so many ascension dates come and go, but I can't. I just don't feel that it is something that happens at a certain time, like January 2014 or whatever. It's something that happens individually. It's collective, but it's through a time span. It's through 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and it's a gradual.
It's an individual proposition. This time it's going to be the whole planet.
I'd like to see that.
And that's what makes it unique.
I'd like to see that, and I really hope that that's the case because I want
stick around. Try not to exit in an untimely fashion. You will get to see it.
I'm trying to stick around until I've finished everything that I've done here. But I told somebody a few years ago. I said, you know what? I feel like I've done everything that I need to do. And he says, well, you're still here, aren't you? I said, yeah. He says, well, obviously you still have more to do.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we're here, then yeah, there's always something to do for sure. Let me go to another question for clarification. The memory wiping, memory wiping that is thought to happen every time you incarnate into 3D or 4D life was part of the incarnation trap, from what I remember of you speaking of. I think you might have talked and spoken about that. That this is part of the trap. Did you make that statement?
Yeah, I do feel that that was part of the trap. The memory wipe was part of the trap. After all, if you couldn't remember that you had a life outside of Earth, well then, when this guy is screaming at you, telling you that you got to go back there.
Right. Is there a choice? Is there a choice? And I think we already touched upon this, but it's part of the question.
Some hold that. Okay, I know that the Breaker Division member that was in the chat in Drake's chat. His experience was that he had choice of memory, but he was also coming in as an incarnate, not an involuntary incarnation. I don't believe the whole involuntary suggests that there wasn't a choice in the matter. It's like involuntary work separation. You didn't choose to be at work. It just happened, whether they fired you or they laid you off or whatever, right? Involuntary means that it wasn't your choice.
Okay.
But in involuntary reincarnation, there was a choice. In my case, I did choose to forget from about the point at which I acquired language and speech till I was about 16 years old. And then, the triggers that I had chosen and built into my own life triggered, and boom, I remembered stuff. But in all my, and what I remember remembering at the time, oh my God, this is the only life I've ever remembered in. What's up with that?
I have a couple more questions for you, and this one actually kind of sticks out. And first, I'll just preface it by saying that it's about Alex Collier, and we actually had him scheduled to come on the show, and all of a sudden he disappeared. Never heard from him.
That's a shame. I would have loved to talk with Alex Collier.
Yeah, nothing at all. And we were in contact with him on the phone, and everything was fine. And then a couple days prior, he disappeared. His phone's turned off. I can't get a hold of him. Nothing at all. This next question is: some have speculated that Alex Collier is no longer on the planet and is with the Andromedans.
I'd have to ask Mornay about that. I haven't had a chance to ask him.
Okay.
I kind of hope for his sake that he is, because I know he's been having it rough.
Yes, he did mention a few of the obstacles that he was facing when I spoke to him. It was very bizarre because he was very open with us, very friendly, and then all of a sudden, boom, never heard from him again. It made me go, oh my God, what happened to Alex? Anyways.
I hope for his sake that he's okay. I hope for his sake that this is, maybe that his family came to get him.
I hope so as well.
He's
definitely
been through a lot. He has had a rough time. Talk about a rough trip. Alex had it.
Who are the real guardians of Terra?
Well, that's hard to say. The ones who were assigned as it kind of reneged on their responsibility, and that has meant that groups and organizations such as our own have had to come in and step in and fulfill that duty.
Okay.
The ones who it was assigned to were the Alcyons, who happened to be Sid Meier's Pleiadians. Now, we call them the Keystone Cops of the galaxy, because if you can F it up, they F it up.
Right.
They're, for the most part, they were considered to be kind of well-meaning incompetents. However, they assured us that they had everything under control here. They didn't. It has been found that there was some degree of complicity to what went on here, and that there is fault and blame. They are partly to blame for the situation that we are here, and because blame really doesn't really help anyone. What this has earned them is it has removed them from the Andromeda Council, and it has removed them from the Galactic Federation of Planets. Because it's a crime that really deserves some kind of response when you consider the consequences that has for this planet and its people and everything we've been through. It's one of those things where if we could have gone back and said, hey, what if the Alcyons are lying and they don't have it under control, and checked in, a lot of this might have been avoided. And in other timelines that might have happened, but this is the one that we perceive and experience.
Excellent. I think that's everything. I just asked in the chat if there's any more questions. Nobody responded, and I went through all the lists that I had. I want to ask you a very, very stupid question, and I understand that I'm very ignorant.
There are no stupid questions. There's just questions that haven't been asked before, or that need to be asked by that person.
I am very ignorant in this subject, and I'm just the facilitator of this broadcast. I'm the host, and the guests talk about whatever they want to talk about. But I'm still a little bit confused as to the Andromeda Council and the Galactic Federation of Planets. And what is this? Is this people here on Earth? Is it
even after
off-world
talking
beings?
with Tolik so many times?
You know what? It's funny because I've never asked him that question directly. I've only asked him the questions.
Well, Tolik's website is a very good, beginner's resource for this. The Andromeda Council. Okay, first of all, none of these are terrestrially based organization. The Andromeda Council is based out of the Andromeda Galaxy, and contains as members the Galactic Federation of Planets, among many others. The Galactic Federations of Planets likewise contains the Andromeda Council as a member, and many planetary members, so they're mutual. You can consider You can consider the Andromeda Council to be something like an intergalactic UN, only one that functions in the way it was intended to. It hasn't been co-opted by the Cabal. And you can think of the Galactic Federation of Planets then as almost like a United States sort of idea, again, functioning as intended, not co-opted by the Cabal.
Well, I guess
in essence, they recognize individual planets, which would be analogous to states in that they are sovereign, they are self-directed, but they come together in a unity as a federation in order to to make life better for all citizens of that federation.
I do understand that point. I guess what I'm unclear about is it? I guess it is a culmination of beings here on this world and off-world as well. And I guess what I'm confused about is, how do these meetings take place? Is there a physical transfer of the body?
It's not on this world. Well, we have incarnates, right?
Okay.
And there might be what we call drop downs, which are actual non-Terrans who are able to pass as humans or as Terrans because they are human, just from a different planet.
Okay.
Who are down here doing various work. But for the most part, our members on this planet are either drop-downs or incarnates. They're not... When they attend meetings, it's up there. It's not based down here on Earth. We have activities on Earth, but it's not based on Earth. One of us who'd attend, like when Tolek attends these meetings, he goes out of his body, or he's in a dream state, or things like that. It's the same with me. I consciously bilocate, or I sleep into it, and if I sleep into it, it's rather hit or miss whether I remember the next morning and in what level of detail.
Okay, that's what I was trying to clear up, because I wasn't sure if it was a physical transfer of the body or a transfer of the soul. Okay.
No,
okay.
It is done non-physically.
Okay, that makes more sense.
And running around up there, and it's funny because sometimes I'll run into Tolek in meetings, and then he'll message me and say, "Hey, I saw you last night at the meeting." Be like, "I don't remember anything."
That's cool.
Okay.
I get information very intuitively. It's not always strictly through remembrance, and a lot of it's also through speaking to people like Admiral Lander.
Okay. So, forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, for showing my ignorance, but I'm humble enough to ask, when I have a question.
And I don't mind explaining.
Okay, good deal. When we have Tolek on, and we've had him on many times before, he's always got everything that he wants to discuss laid out, and so I never really get a chance to get any questions in. It's just, and I respect that. I mean, he's got a lot of information that he's trying to get out in a short period of time, so I try not to interrupt.
Yeah, whereas I prefer to be more audience-led or audience-directed.
That's good.
Good deal. Yeah. It definitely makes for the better shows, in my opinion, when it's a more casual conversation.
It is. And it addresses the level of information that it's actually at people's understanding, right? And it addresses what they need to know, or what they feel they need to know.
Definitely. Anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
I'd just like to reiterate, about being an active participant in your own life as opposed to a passive passenger. And again, really, your mindset matters. So try to maintain a positive mindset as much as possible. Don't let anyone stampede you into doom and gloom and disaster. There's absolutely no requirement for it anywhere. Live long and prosper.
I agree with that, and I think ultimately I would add to that we create our own reality, and that's all that we have the control over is our own reality. So when we change ourselves, then our reality changes around us, and yes, we do feel the weight and the dictation of the global consciousness, but it all starts with the individual. And if we all took that one responsibility to just change that one person, we don't have to change the world, we just have to change one person, but each of us has to take that individual responsibility, then everything will change on its own.
Exactly. And if nothing else, you can at least choose how you're going to act and react.
Yes.
Nobody makes you feel. You feel. You're up to, you're responsible for your own emotions and your own actions.
Oh, definitely, definitely. That's something I've said before. When people say, that guy made me mad. Well, wait, why are you allowing that person to do that to you?
And I mean, like, not everybody is perfect at this. We don't. It's unreasonable to expect somebody to be a Zen master 100% of the time when they're not a Zen master.
Right.
But if you try to live according to that, it will make a difference in your life. A positive, beneficial difference in your life.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, so thank you so much for your time this evening, and I'm so glad that AG connected us because the energy is great, and the information, I think, was fantastic.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I have a confession. I don't go seeking out radio hosts. I let them come to me. So, I'm quite happy to be here with you, and I'm hoping to be here again sometime.
Oh,
of
you know what?
course.
I do have one more question for you.
Huh?
We've had George on a few times before, and I know George has come across with some very controversial material
George
lately.
whom?
Cavassalis.
Oh, him, yeah.
Yes. His idea is that the pineal gland, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the pineal gland is actually an implant to keep you locked into this universal matrix, and so are the chakra systems. And
That does not fit with our experience. In our experience, humans have pineals, even in higher dimensions, that have not been tampered with. And theirs are a lot bigger.
okay.
And in our experience, the chakra system continues, and actually there are more chakras than are recognized in our current 7 chakra model. So, in our experience, I would have to say that is not, that's not what we have experienced.
Okay. Okay.
If he wants to say that, he wants to say that, but that's not our experience.
I listen to everything, and then I take whatever
As a radio
resonates with
host,
me.
yeah,
Yes.
you kind of have to do that.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly. And I like George. He's
Part of being-
he's a really nice guy. He's always been really sweet to us, and so is Cynthia. But I don't agree with a lot of what he says. But then again, I don't agree with what a lot of people say, because I've always believed that if you believe somebody or agree with somebody 100%, then you're not really thinking on your own.
exactly. We have an obligation to decide for ourselves and think for ourselves, and we have an obligation for discernment. What is truth for me may not be truth for you. It is, I can present to you peacefully my truth, and you can take those aspects of my truth which work for you. It would be wrong for me to try to forcefully shove my truth down your throat and make it your truth, just as it would be wrong for you to do the same to me. But we can recognize each other's truths and agree with them. I do tend to speak from my own experience, and these are the experiences that I have, so they are very much truth for me, but they might not be for other people, and I can respect that as long as they can respect mine.
I completely agree with you. And it's funny because as a radio show host, sometimes I get, in October 10th, 2009 at 11:59 into the broadcast, you said this, and now you're saying this 4 years later. Well, that's because I've
that
evolved.
assumes that human beings are static. We're not. We're always in motion. We're always changing.
Always
the things I believed when I was 5 years old are not the same things I believe now. The things I believed when I was 20 are not the same things. Our understand grows and goes through changes even as we do. We're not static. It's one of the things I don't like about the paper trail and the internet age is it presumes static when human beings are dynamic.
Right.
Yes, I totally agree. Definitely. Again, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Great.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for calling me in for this.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I've completely forgot. What are the websites?
Yeah.
Oh, silverlegion.org. O-R-G. So that's silver as in the metal, legion as in many, .org. That is not legion as in, I am legion, oh! Because I've gotten people who've hit me with that. Say, in the Bible there was a demon that called himself legion. You know what legion means? It means many.
Right.
And we're using it in the Roman sense, which means army.
Right, exactly.
Not demon, army.
Well, people are going to take whatever they want out of the words.
I find the ones who come at me with that don't know their own book.
Right, right. And they're usually stuck in some kind of little box. And yeah, I hear it all the time. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but
Well, they're angry that you want to get out of the box. That's
sorry, it's
their
not my
problem.
box. I'm not staying in it. You can if you want, but I'm gone.
one of the most controversial is the term Lucifer, which means the light bearer.
The
And
light bearer, yeah. Oh boy, that's not really all that inflammatory in at face value, but oh boy, does it ever get people hot and under the collar.
Oh, yes, it does. And it's kind of funny in a sense because you can shake people up and, well, wait a minute, what's wrong with light? Well, it's a false light. Okay. As a matter of fact, in the Bible, Lucifer is mentioned one time, if I remember correctly, and Satan isn't even mentioned until later in the New Testament.
Even hell is only mentioned in the New Testament, and even then, it is a mistranslation of Gehenna or Sheol, which, if you look into the mythology, Gehenna and Sheol are basically not interminable torture, but interminable boredom.
Right.
This notion of hell came along sometime after the Council of Nicaea.
The term
it was purposefully constructed.
The term that they used for hell, it was actually, if I remember correctly, some scholars have said that it is a garbage pit in Jerusalem where they would burn the garbage. And so that's where you get the fire and brimstone from, because it's that place where they would burn the garbage.
Yeah, and it's often conflated with some of the, the Greek and the Roman beliefs of the underworld, Hades and Tartarus and stuff like that. And even then, I took my Greek and Roman studies in university. Hades was, again, it was not hell. It was eternal boredom. It was a place where heroes went when they died. Not everybody. Heroes. Everybody else got to, go away or conveniently non-exist or were not dealt with by Greek and Roman mythology, period. No, the heroes get to sit around in abject boredom for the rest of eternity. Oh man, that does not sound like fun. It doesn't sound like fire and brimstone, but it doesn't sound like fun.
Well, you can look at the book 1984 and see Newspeak and the idea of Newspeak, where in 1984 they're constantly removing words from the language in order to prevent people from thinking a certain way. And I think that's what we're seeing now. This somebody mentioned
redaction of human consciousness in language.
Yes, somebody mentioned the serpent of Genesis, and the serpent has a completely different meaning than Satan. But they've kept you away from that.
And the serpent from Genesis, boy, that sounds a lot like sounds a lot like reptilians. You could take the Genesis story and say that, Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden, and what you're seeing is a metaphor not for Adam and Eve being punished by God, but for Adam and Eve suffering at the hands of the serpent. All these poisonous plants and biting insects and coils and things. I know from history, from galactic history, that prior to the invasion of the reptilians, this place was very much like a Garden of Eden. It was a pretty sweet place. And then the reptilians came, and all of a sudden we had biting snakes, and we had insects that wanted your blood. We had parasites that did horrible things to you. We had short lifespans. We had the requirement for toil. Those weren't done to us by God as punishment. They were the result of the serpent, the reptilians.
Let me ask you about the flip side of that, because there are certain lines of thinking where we were trapped as slaves in the Garden of Eden, and then the serpent came and gave us the knowledge to free ourselves.
Well,
draconian deception
doesn't fit with what I know in terms of history.
Because if you're in a constant,
I guess it depends on what time frame you're talking about.
If you're in a constant state of bliss, then you don't seek out more, and so you don't seek out a higher spirit.
I don't know about that, because you know what, there are higher dimensionals, and their lives are pretty blissful according to what we would consider, but they're still seeking out more. This notion of complacency, well, people are still, you get bored when you're not doing anything, right?
True.
It's like, there's no requirement that anyone works in higher dimensional positive societies. Food is provided, shelter is provided, it's all there for you. but you still don't see the functional equivalent of this construct, and I will call it a construct, because anybody who has ever been on welfare and been in that demoralization and that horrible situation that is very dehumanizing knows it's not that this is not the truth. But the construct of the welfare bum does not exist in higher dimensions. Nobody's just sitting around being useless. You get bored doing that. You might do it for a little while if you really, really need to because you've been horribly traumatized. But no, you get bored, and sooner or later you do something, and by its nature, usually something is productive. We don't have the same valuation system that declares, making art or music, even for your own pleasure, as non-productive, or raising children as non-productive. If you're alive and you're kicking and you're doing something other than staring at a wall, you are doing something, and it's likely productive.
I can agree with that, because if I had millions and millions of dollars, then I wouldn't sit around. I would go down to the Amazon and study with a shaman. I would go to Thailand and study with the Buddhists. I would constantly work on my spiritual evolution.
If we had the restriction of having to take care of our day-to-day provisioning removed and had the freedom to do whatever we wanted, we wouldn't sit around staring at the wall. Well, some of us might play video games all day, but even that can be argued as productive, because it involves thought and interaction in some degree, but you'd be doing something. Everybody has a pet project that they do if they win the lottery. For me, mine would involve actually waste treatment, turning human excrement into fertilizer and energy.
Mine would include rebuilding libraries. And getting everything. I mean, I want everything under the Vatican.
Oh yeah, all those little secrets down there that they've been hiding from humanity.
I want it all scanned.
All that alien tech, when they're telling us on one hand aliens aren't real and this is the only thing that's got life on it, and God's sole focus in the universe, while they're hiding all that hybrid alien tech down there. Yeah, that's a laugh.
I want them to open up their vaults. I want to see the goods.
Yep.
And if I had all the money in the world, I would do that, because I think that humanity needs to be freed.
And that's, really, like I said, the notion of welfare bums, of people sitting around doing nothing, is non-existent. It's a construct. Everybody has something they would do if they had the free will choice in the matter.
Can you speak on time travel at all from a galactic perspective?
Well, you'd need to clarify that, because time travel is a huge subject and not one of my favorite ones. Time turns my brain into knots.
Is it, well, I mean, I guess first of all, the main question would be, is it possible? Second would be, are they utilizing it? And third, is it possible to change the present or the future by manipulating the past?
Yes. Caveat. It takes an awful lot of effort to alter events. So, and then even if you alter it, you go back to you may not get to the experience the timeline that resulted from your alteration. You may still be on the original timeline. So yes, you made the change. Yes, it happens in some alternate universe, but it isn't necessarily the one that you get to perceive yourself as experiencing or perceive.
Okay. Well, I've often wondered about that. The other day we were driving down the street and all of a sudden this light was green and it turned red immediately.
It didn't turn yellow.
No yellow, no nothing like that. And we got around the corner and we noticed some hotels that were not there before, that we don't remember before.
Oh, sounds like you had a reality shift or a timeline shift, a personal timeline shift. And usually these are seamless. Usually we aren't consciously aware of it, because when we slip into another timeline, it feels like we've always been in that timeline, and we typically remember that timeline, not the other one. But occasionally they are jarring, such as the circumstance that you relate. That sounds like a timeline shift. You would have to ask yourself, ask your solar plexus or whatnot, did I step into something better? And I'm hoping that you did. Although I'm saying that if we're on enough of a shared timeline that we're able to interact right now, that you probably did you didn't go anywhere worse.
I don't think no. I think it was just subtle changes in whatever they were trying to do, and I just happened to catch a glimpse of some of the changes that were taking place. But I do know around October of 2010, when they fired up CERN, consequently, we seem to have just shifted into this negative timeline, at least in my personal experience. Everything possible that could go wrong went wrong. People died. I mean, it was just like
it wasn't
shifting.
nearly as bad as it could have been. You know what? We did have a negative a speed bump, but our timeline since then, Terra's timeline, because there are personal timelines, group timelines, planetary, system, galactic, etc. Terra's timeline in general has been making many points for the positive stream in the last 2 years. We've already recovered from the hit of 2010, and we're already recovered from the hit of 2001.
So you do agree that there's something happened in 2010 that just hit us, boom, in a negative timeline?
Yep, but it didn't
amazing.
persist.
Okay.
Now, one of the things about attempting to make alterations to the timeline is these tend to backfire. And I'm talking about, again, you look at the Looking Glass material, where they asked the question of how can we fix, or, from their opinion, fix it, from everybody else, break it. How could we change this? And they asked, is there any way they could? And everything they did just resulted in a worse and worse outcome for them, and a better and better outcome for us. So, it's kind of like playing with cornstarch and water.
Right.
And other non-Newtonian fluids. The more you push it, the less it behaves the way a fluid normally behaves.
Have you ever
The more you push it, the less it's going to do for you.
Have you ever experienced or maybe heard of an experience where the timeline shifts either for an individual or maybe even collectively, and then people who have passed away are suddenly alive again? For instance, I saw a news story about that woman from Golden Girls, and I don't remember what her name was. Anne something. I can't remember off the top of my head. Betty White. That's it.
Betty White.
Yes, that she had passed away. And I even found...
And she's definitely still up and kicking.
She's still up and kicking, right. And then I even found these videos, and then all of a sudden they started disappearing, but I even found confirmation after the fact that, wait, she's alive. I've got all this proof that she's dead. What happened here?
I have not personally... usually when I hear about these incidents, I hear things like what you told me about like buildings being there that weren't there before, or... email addresses or participation that wasn't what it was yesterday, or, other things that are more subtle. And again, from what I know, is usually it's subtle, and when you enter into the new time stream, you remember the memories of that time stream, not necessarily the one you just came from. But it's not beyond possibility.
Okay. I had a friend.
No, Anon 5937, I do not believe in absolute truth.
I'm right there with you as far as that.
The multiverse is just too big. I mean, yes, there's absolute truth in such that it's there somewhere in the multiverse, but that does not mean that there is an absolute truth for any given place, person, point of time, whatever. Everything's always in motion. Absolute truth requires static.
Right.
Well,
it's like the notion of perfection.
They've asked
perfection requires static. Perfection actually denies its own existence, because if it is perfect, it cannot change. If it cannot change, it is static. As things change around with it, it is no longer perfect, and therefore it was never perfect to begin with.
Right. I agree.
No, I don't read everything's art. I just caught that. I'm leaning back and able to...
Well, we were talking about this earlier, and they asked this question over and over, and I'm pretty sure that I addressed the question because I marked it off the list. But like I was saying earlier, there are many different layers of truth, and what is your truth is not necessarily the same as what another person's truth is, and that's due, in my opinion, to the evolutionary process of the soul and the mind. Even here on this earth, like I said before, the people
Just
watching
saying,
Fox
I have
News.
to protect my sanity here. 5614. No, please don't flood my mailbox, please. I can't even keep up with the emails that I get. I can't answer them all anymore, and it's bothering me because I feel so bad about this. I think it might actually be more effective to participate in these radio discussions where we have call-ins, because I'm just not able to keep up with emails.
I think next time we have you on, we should do that. We should take calls next time.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I think we should have you on maybe once a month to get an update, or every
if
couple
my
months.
semi-crazy social schedule permits, I'm down.
Okay.
Whenever you're free. Yeah, we'll
whenever
try
you're
to coordinate again. But a call-in show would be great, definitely. We've got call-in lines. We just haven't opened them. We usually don't. We get a lot of trolls. There were some trolls in the chat room, too. I had to boot them. It's like, why are you going to come to my house and disrespect me and my guests?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense, but that's what they do.
I don't go and poop on your floor, do I?
Right, exactly.
That's what we've always seen it as too. Yeah, and I mean, I like what you say about the evolution of consciousness, because when me and Chris first started out the show, we were on a love and light trip. Then we went through a real dark period where things were. I mean, even Chris wrote a song. A really dark dubstep beat that was just, really dark. And, I was having the same kind of vibe, same kind of energy as well. And that seemed to have leveled off about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, somewhere around there. What do you think about our ability to control these timeline shifts?
It is something that intent affects significantly. Mm-hmm. And, anybody who wants to be on a positive timeline will find their way there, provided they're not sabotaging themselves horribly by forcing the negative in their own thoughts.
Do you think we'll ever get to a point to where people literally, as the Christians say, rapture, and not in the sense that they're all going to be called up to heaven, but that there's some kind of dimensional shift where we actually start seeing people disappear from our reality because they're going to that negative timeline, or maybe they're even going to the positive timeline, and we're left in the negative?
That could be considered a metaphor for, the timeline splintering that happens at the point of the transition to the next dimension. And I'm talking about the physical transition, because the transition itself is a process. It's something that is ongoing in terms of consciousness and mentality, and even the physical changes and whatnot. But at some point, there is a on-off. We go from three-dimensional dense matter to fourth-dimensional fine matter, and it is an instantaneous transfer. And when people think of the shift, this is the event. The hallmark event they are thinking of, but the transition is actually the period before and after, and including all of that and all of the changes therein. But yes, at the point of the actual shift itself, that might actually take place, where those who are going on to the fourth dimensional positive go on to the fourth dimensional positive, and those who stay in the third dimensional negative, the tiny minority that they are, they'll see us die, we'll see them vanish.
Okay. That makes sense. It does. That's the first thing, as a matter of fact, that I thought of when I heard the idea of ascension into another dimension. I thought, well, there's no way to do that without a physical death of the body. Is that true to
Well, no. It will look like, to the third dimensional negatives, it'll look like we all died. But we didn't. We won't experience death in that transition.
Okay.
It will just be 1 minute to the next. There we go.
I gotcha.
Okay.
There's a question in the chat, and I'm not familiar with this term, but it says, what
does she know about bodhisattvas?
Yes.
Bodhisattvas are, in Buddhist theology, bodhisattvas are basically, the term ascended master is sometimes thrown around in English, but I really don't like that, because it's misused a lot, and it's misused a lot by channelers. And a lot of things come in saying that they're ascended masters, and All they really are saying is that they want to be our masters. But a bodhisattva is somebody who has reached a point in their own conscious development, or the development of their consciousness, where they leave the physical world entirely, whether through death or something else, and then have the ability to choose to come back. So, honestly, I would say that this is somebody who gets out of the karma trap.
Okay.
That's somewhere where I would definitely like to head to, and be able to make that conscious decision rather than being sucked up back into the wheel. I call it the wheel. Yeah,
that's removed. Even this 3D world is not going to exist as that anymore. Earth's consciousness is becoming four-dimensional, and Gaia is a living being with a consciousness. So the majority of beings on this planet will be fourth-dimensional consciousness with her. They're going along for the ride. There will still be a 3D placeholder, and those who decide not to go along with the ride, well, they'll enjoy their dystopian paradise for a little while, and then there won't be anything left.
And there's another question: will the Cabal members be barred wet from Ascension?
Barred from Ascension. It's not a matter of barring. Okay, people still speak as if there's some authority out there saying, "Okay, you go, you stay." That's not the case. There's no authority out there pointing fingers and counting you off like Roman legionaries for decimation. No. But those who there are, we'll have a chance for our justice. We'll put it that way. We'll have a chance for our justice with these people and these beings. Some aspect of them will still also experience their dystopian paradise, which all of us choose not to because, 90% of us don't exist in that, so we've opted out of it already.
Right.
I've always said the best revenge is living well.
It is. Mm-hmm. But honestly, sometimes people do need to answer for what they've done.
Yes, they do. I know some people here in this plane that have given people a lot of grief, and I don't know. But what's funny is that the people giving grief, there's one guy who's been hounding us for a long time. He's pretty much dead at this point. He just had pneumonia. He was in the hospital for like 3 weeks. I mean, he's living in a very, very horrific state. And we've never responded to him, never said anything to him. And he's done this not to us, but to several other people. But I think it just
kind of makes me sad, because here's this guy who spends all of his energy on hate and awfulness, and then he starts to suffer, and probably nobody's going to care because he's such an asshole.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Poor guy.
And it just goes to show, you harbor all that negativity, you harbor all that hate, and that's exactly what you get in return.
Yeah, although I would have to say, we got to be careful with that mindset, because then we start getting into punish the victim. I don't want to get into a mindset where somebody who's suffering from cancer is reaping some kind of punishment for something they did, which isn't necessarily the case. But it is one of these things where you gotta kind of feel pity for the guy, but at the same time, it feels like, wow, he just really got that.
You know what? I don't like to admit it because he has been very, very evil with us, but I did feel some pity, and I thought to myself, oh my God, that's horrible. It's just my nature to feel that way, but then again, I have to disconnect myself.
I feel that way with everyone.
I know. I have to disconnect myself though and say, okay, well, I'm not connected to the situation, so that situation is taking place without any of my interaction or any of my emotions at all. Period.
Yeah, he might have just,
Well, there were some other people
created his own poison out of stress and stuff like that. That does happen, right?
That is true. And also
chemicals we create with stress and anger can actually make us sick.
Right. Some other people were sending some very, very negative intention that way. Right. Other people that he has affected in the same negative way that we have, and they've reached out to me and said, oh, yeah, this was my intent, and this is exactly what he got. And I thought to myself, oh, my God, now you're having to carry all of that karma of negative energy.
Right.
Oh well.
Yeah.
That's everybody's on their own path. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
We're each on our
I
own
prefer what's the word I'm looking for? Constructive action.
path. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Instead of a bloody, French Revolution style of bloodbath, we should have an intellectual enlightenment period. My mic is having.
Oh, here, let me fix it.
I can't hear her all of a sudden.
We need to go get a new mic.
Yeah, something's happening to
Tomorrow.
our cables here. I think it's so dry that our cables are starting to fall apart because both of our mic cables are going bad.
Right, right.
Really? Wow. I had to buy a new headset because I rolled over the cord one too many times.
Well, your mic sounds great.
Oh yeah, this one is wireless. I did this. I thought, well, it's more expensive, but then on the other hand, if I keep buying a $20 headset and have to replace it 3 times a year because I roll over the cords.
You know, we actually did a live broadcast where we were driving up and down Hollywood Boulevard.
With Donnie Gilson,
It was
one of our friends.
really cool. Yeah. So,
Ooh, you know what? Driving while talking, tisk tisk.
Well,
as
that
long
is
as you didn't
bad,
hurt
yes.
anyone.
Oh, don't call the cops
No,
on
they
us,
got laws
please.
against that here, but I think it's laws against holding a cell phone. I don't think it's laws against like hands free.
we had headsets on, yes, and we did get pulled over while we were in California for driving while talking on the cell phone. So
At one point,
I did learn over there that you're not supposed to do that. It's funny. I've spoken to Andrew Bashago, for instance, off air, and all of a sudden he'll just drop the phone. And
That guy is interesting.
He is, and everything will go dead. And Andrew, what happened? Oh, well, the cop came by.
Yeah.
That guy is really an interesting fellow.
He is. There are a lot of interesting individuals that we've come across, and it's,
No doubt.
you know, I think we can learn from everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
And even people who may be technically incorrect may still have something you can learn from.
Right.
That's the beauty of this, and that's why we urge discernment, because, well, nobody is a 100% clear. Nobody is 100% right. Not even me. I'm right for me, but that doesn't mean I'm right for everybody. And I could be honestly mistaken or missing information, or, maybe the situation or the understanding changes down the line, and what was correct today is not correct tomorrow. And
Well, I know one
that's
thing
life.
for sure.
That's a universe in motion. Tends to stay in motion.
I know one thing for sure, and
Nothing.
that's that I know nothing.
Yeah. Nothing stays still. Even if you're sitting there floating in space, not going anywhere, the rest of the space is moving around you, so you're still moving. There's no such thing as not moving. You might be sitting in your chair now thinking you're moving, but you're moving in an orbit around the sun, which is moving in its own orbit, which is moving as part of galactic movement, which is moving as part of a cluster. Nothing is ever standing still, no matter what it might look like.
Oh, do you have any insight on the bombardment of asteroids and meteors? Some people would say that it was the destruction.
Somebody's resorting to throwing rocks as a tantrum. They're not going to work either.
That is pretty funny. I've never thought about it like that.
That's
People
like
say,
silly
well,
red
see,
rock
we
flinging.
blew up Nibiru in 2010, and now so we're seeing this rocks coming this way and all of this.
No. It's just somebody throwing rocks. They're mad because they're not able to do something else. They throw rocks and we stop them. It's no big deal.
Wow, I've never thought about it like that. I've always thought, oh, well, there's got to be some kind of disaster coming. There's a big planetary object
No.
heading